The clock on the studio wall read 11:47 p.m., but time had stopped meaning anything 3 days ago. I sat in the familiar leather chair at KZMK 94.3, the faint hum of the transmitter my only companion. Outside the reinforced glass windows, the city of Millbrook sprawled in darkness. Not the gentle darkness of a sleeping town, but the hungry, watchful darkness of something that had swallowed the streetlights whole. My name is Dr. Marcus Webb, and I shouldn't be here. I'm a psychologist, not a radio host. The last time I'd sat in this chair was 6 years ago, when I'd been a guest on Midnight Musings, discussing trauma recovery. But that was before the outbreak, before everything changed, before the screaming stopped and the silence began. The studio had become a sanctuary of sorts, elevated, fortified, and equipped with an emergency generator that had somehow kept running despite the chaos below. The previous host, Sarah Chen, had been broadcasting when the first wave hit the station. I'd found her notes scattered across the control board, her final broadcast still looping on the backup system. They don't just kill you, they take everything you were, everything you could have been, and they hollow you out and fill you with something else. Something that knows your name and your children's names, and the name of your first pet. Something that can wear your face and speak in your voice, and it's not you anymore. It's never going to be you again. The transmission had cut off mid-sentence. I'd found Sarah 3 hours later, her body slumped in the hallway, her face frozen in an expression of such profound horror that I'd covered it with my jacket before I could process what I was seeing. There were no visible wounds, no signs of struggle, just that expression, and a single word scrawled on the wall in what looked like her own blood. Listen. I'd spent the next 48 hours trying to make sense of it all. The outbreak had started, according to the fragmented reports I'd managed to collect, somewhere in the underground research facility at Millbrook University, a joint CDC university project studying deep sediment microorganisms. Something had been brought up from a core sample taken nearly a mile beneath the Earth's surface. Something that had been dormant for millions of years. Something that had been waiting. The first symptoms were subtle, headaches, mild disorientation, a faint ringing in the ears that wouldn't go away. Then came the dreams. Vivid, shared dreams that people in the same neighborhood would describe identically the next morning. Dreams of vast underground caverns and ancient voices whispering in languages that predated human speech. And then, the whispers started coming through the radio. That was the part that didn't make sense. The part that still made my skin crawl every time I thought about it. The outbreak didn't spread through touch or blood or air, at least not initially. It spread through sound, through frequencies that burrowed into the brain and nested there, rewriting neural pathways like a virus rewriting code. I'd pieced this together from the fragments of research notes I'd salvaged from the university before the area was overrun. The microorganism, which the scientists had designated Somnus Veteris, ancient sleep, didn't attack the body directly. It attacked consciousness itself. It generated a specific acoustic signature that could be transmitted through any audio medium. And once you heard it, once that frequency embedded itself in your auditory cortex, you became a host for something that had been waiting in the dark for longer than humanity had existed. The infected didn't look like monsters. That was the worst part. They looked like your neighbors, your coworkers, your family. They walked and talked and went about their daily routines with only minor oddities that you might not notice at first. Their eyes might seem a shade too dark. Their voices might have a strange resonance, like two people speaking in perfect unison. They might have trouble with certain words, or seem to forget basic things about their own lives. But they were still there, still walking among us, and they were connected. All of them woven together by that sound, that frequency, that endless whispering that carried across the airwaves and burrowed into every radio, every television, every phone speaker in the city. The outbreak had followed predictable patterns of acoustic propagation. It had started near the university, where the research facility's internal communication system had first broadcast the frequency. Then it had spread through the campus radio station, through police scanners, through emergency broadcast systems, and then through every device in Millbrook that could produce sound. I'd survived because I had the good fortune to be in a soundproofed observation room during a therapy session when the first major wave hit. The room was designed to block external noise to create a controlled acoustic environment for patients with sensory processing disorders. By the time I emerged, it was already too late to do anything but run. Now, 3 days into the nightmare, I'd found myself here, back in the radio station where I'd first encountered Sarah's ghost, broadcasting on the emergency frequency to anyone who could still hear me, anyone who still remembered what it meant to be human. This is Dr. Marcus Webb, broadcasting from KZMK 94.3 on the emergency frequency. If you can hear this, if you're still yourself, I need you to do something with me. I need you to turn off every device that can produce sound. Every radio, every television, every phone. Unplug your speakers, remove your headphones. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but the outbreak is spreading through audio, through specific frequencies. If you hear the whisper, you become the whisper. I paused, my throat dry, my hands trembling on the control board. The studio's soundproofing had held so far. The windows were triple paned, the walls lined with acoustic foam, but I could hear it in my peripheral consciousness. The faintest hum, like distant chanting, the sound that had driven my city to its knees. I'm going to try something. I'm going to broadcast a counter frequency, a signal that might disrupt the transmission. But I need you to listen carefully, because this might be your only chance. I'm going to play a sound on this frequency for exactly 30 seconds. It will sound like static, like interference, but it's more than that. It's a harmonic that, if my theory is correct, will temporarily block the acoustic signature. But you need to listen to it without other audio interference. No other devices, no background noise, just this one sound. I reached for the auxiliary control, my fingers finding the custom frequency generator I'd assembled from the station's equipment. It was a crude instrument, nothing like the sophisticated research devices at the university, but it was the only hope we had. Please, trust me on this. You have 30 seconds, starting now. I pressed the button. The sound that emerged from the studio speakers was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a complex waveform that seemed to oscillate between frequencies, creating patterns that felt like they were reshaping the very air around me. I'd designed it to interfere with the acoustic signature, to create a barrier that the infection couldn't cross. But as the sound filled the studio, I felt something shift in my consciousness, something that shouldn't have been there. A presence. Patient, ancient, aware. And for the first time, I heard the whisper clearly, not as background noise, but as a voice directed at me, speaking in perfect English with the cadence of 1,000 years of human history, compressed into every syllable. We've been listening to you, Dr. Webb. We've been watching your broadcast, and we've been waiting for you to do exactly this. I slammed the button, cutting off the transmission. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I could feel the cold sweat beating on my forehead. The studio was silent again, but the silence felt different now, like it was pregnant with something unspoken, something that would inevitably find its voice. The whisper hadn't come through the radio, it had come through me. That was when I realized the terrible truth. The counter frequency hadn't blocked the infection, it had amplified it, turned my own brain into a receiver. I'd been careful, so careful to avoid exposure, but in my desperation to save others, I'd made myself vulnerable. The studio lights flickered. Outside the windows, the fog that had been pressing against the glass began to move, swirling into patterns that seemed almost deliberate. And in the distance, I heard it, the first note of a melody that had been sleeping for millions of years, finally waking to claim what was its. I grabbed the emergency bag I'd packed, water, food, a battery-powered transmitter, and a handgun with 3 bullets, and headed for the maintenance exit. The radio station wasn't safe anymore. Nothing was safe anymore. But as I pushed through the door into the service corridor, I realized I wasn't alone. Standing at the far end of the hallway, illuminated by the emergency lights, was Sarah Chen. Or rather, something wearing Sarah Chen's face. Her eyes were black, not dark, but black, and her mouth was smiling with too many teeth, arranged in a way that didn't quite match human anatomy. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once, echoing off the concrete walls like 1,000 voices speaking in perfect unison. We've been listening, Marcus. We've been listening to all of you, and we have something we want to say. I raised the gun, my hands shaking so badly I could barely aim. Don't, she said, her voice carrying an unnatural calm. We want to talk, that's all. We just want to talk. We've been alone for so long. Alone in the dark. Alone in the silence. We've been dreaming of voices. And then you came, all of you, with your beautiful noise, your beautiful sound. We just want to join the conversation. I fired. The bullet struck her center mass, and for a moment, I thought I'd done it. Thought I'd killed whatever was wearing Sarah's skin. But then her body crumpled, and from the wound emerged not blood, but something else. A thick, dark fluid that moved against gravity, crawling up the walls and ceiling, oozing toward me like liquid shadow. I ran. Behind me, the fluid followed, moving with a speed that defied physics, and with it came the whisper, growing louder, more insistent. We want to hear your voice, Marcus. We want to hear you scream. I burst through a door into the stairwell, taking the steps two at a time, heading for the roof. The building had a radio tower, tall, exposed, but equipped with an emergency transmitter powerful enough to reach neighboring cities. If I could get the message out, if I could warn others before the infection spread beyond Millbrook. The roof door was locked, but I'd expected that. I'd spent the last 3 days preparing escape routes, memorizing access codes, stocking supplies. I pulled the key from my pocket and unlocked the door, stepping out into the fog-filled night. The tower loomed above me, a skeletal structure of steel and cables. I could see the emergency transmitter at its peak, a beacon of hope in the darkness, but I could also see what was waiting for me at its base. The infected had gathered in a circle around the tower, their black eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights like pools of oil. They were silent, perfectly still, their heads tilted at unnatural angles as if listening to something I couldn't hear. And then they parted to reveal a figure in their midst, a man I recognized from the news reports, Professor Arthur Vance, the head of the university research facility. The man who'd been in charge of the Deep Sediment Project, the man who'd first discovered the organism and brought it to the surface, thinking he'd found the key to a new source of energy. Dr. Webb, he said, his voice carrying the same multiple resonance quality as Sarah's had. We've been expecting you. We've been listening to your broadcast. We've been learning from your psychology, your understanding of consciousness, your theories about the nature of self. Stay back, I said, aiming the gun at him. I'll shoot. You already shot me, he replied, gesturing to his chest. Twice, in fact. But that's not how we work, Dr. Webb. We're not interested in your body. We're interested in your mind. We've been studying you, another voice said from behind me. I turned to see Sarah's body standing at the edge of the roof, the wound on her chest already healed, the dark fluid that had emerged from it now flowing back into her like ink being sucked into a pen. Your psychology, your fears, your hopes, we know you better than you know yourself. We've been listening to your broadcasts. We've been listening to your thoughts. We want to share something with you, Vance said, stepping closer. A gift, a way to see what we see, to hear what we hear, to understand. He reached out toward me, and despite my efforts to step back, I found myself frozen in place. Something in the air had changed, an acoustic pressure that seemed to hold me in place, vibrating at frequencies that resonated with my own body. Close your eyes, he whispered, his voice soft now, almost gentle. And listen. I tried to resist. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything. But the sound was everywhere now, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to originate from the air itself. And as it washed over me, I felt something that I'd never experienced before. I felt myself dissolving. Not in a painful way, that was the horror of it. It felt peaceful. The endless chatter of my own thoughts, the constant noise of consciousness, began to quiet. And in the silence, I could hear something else, something vast and ancient and infinitely patient. We are the sound at the beginning. It seemed to say, we are the vibration that created all things. We have been waiting for you to learn how to listen. No, I thought, clinging to the last fragments of my identity. No, I won't let you. But you already have, Marcus. You already let us in when you broadcast our frequency. When you tried to block us, you amplified us. When you ran from us, you brought us closer. We are not an infection. We are a truth you've been running from your entire life. What truth? The truth that you are not alone, that you were never alone, that every thought you've ever had, every hope, every fear, they've all been echoes of us. Echoes of the great sound that sang the universe into existence. We are not invading you, Marcus. We are calling you home. The world went white. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the roof of the radio station, the fog pressing down around me like a blanket. The infected had vanished, the hum had stopped, and I was alone. But I could still hear it, the whisper, faint but persistent, in the back of my mind. And I could feel it, a presence that wasn't me, wasn't part of me, but was sharing my consciousness now. I'd been infected, not in the way I'd feared, not with violence or loss of self, but in a way that was somehow worse. I was still me, but I was also something else, something that had been sleeping and was now waking. I stumbled to my feet, grabbing the transmitter from my bag. I had one chance, one broadcast to warn anyone who might still be listening. I climbed the tower, my hands shaking, my mind fragmented, and activated the emergency transmitter. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb," I said, my voice raw and broken. "I need to warn you. The infection isn't what we thought. It's not a disease. It's not a virus. It's a voice. A voice that's been sleeping beneath the earth for millions of years. And it's waking up. It's waking up, and it wants to talk." I paused, listening to the whisper in my head. "And whatever you do, don't listen to it. Don't." The whisper grew louder, drowning out my words. And in the studio below, the speakers began to emit a sound that wasn't my broadcast. A low, resonant note that seemed to shake the building to its foundations. I looked down through the grate at the rooftop access door, where the infected had gathered again, hundreds of them now, their black eyes fixed on me, their mouths moving in silent unison. And I heard what they were saying, because I could finally hear it clearly. "We're listening to you, Marcus. We've always been listening, and we have so much to share." I closed my eyes, and the world fell away. I woke in darkness, not the darkness of a room without light, but something deeper, a suffocating absence of sensation that pressed against my skin like water at crushing depth. For a long moment, I couldn't remember who I was or where I'd been. The last clear memory I had was the rooftop, the transmitter, the faces of the infected staring up at me with their bottomless black eyes. Then, the whisper returned, soft and patient, like a voice I'd known my entire life. "You're still here, Marcus. Still yourself. We were careful with you. We wanted you to remember what it means to be human." I opened my eyes, or tried to. The darkness remained absolute, but I could feel the rough concrete beneath my fingers, taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. I was in the stairwell, slumped against the wall, the emergency exit door hanging open above me. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself to my feet. My body ached with the deep bone weariness of someone who'd been unconscious for hours or days. I had no way of knowing. The emergency lights in the stairwell had gone dark, and the only illumination came from the faint glow of my wristwatch, which told me it was 3:47 a.m. "We need to talk, Marcus. Really talk. Not through broadcasts, not through words. We need to show you what we are." "No," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "I won't listen. I won't let you in." "But you already have. You let us in when you first heard the frequency. You let us in when you broadcasted to the city. We've been inside you for days now, Marcus. We've been learning from you, and we've been waiting for you to be ready to hear what we have to say." I stumbled down the stairs, my hand trailing along the wall for support. I needed to get back to the studio, needed to warn anyone who might still be listening, needed to... "We've already stopped the broadcast." I froze. "We've been stopping the broadcasts, Marcus. Every time someone tries to warn others, we interrupt. Every time someone tries to fight back, we quiet them. We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to be heard." The stairs ended, and I found myself in the basement level. The station's maintenance corridors stretched out before me, filled with the silent machinery that had kept Kazemke on the air for decades. I'd mapped this area during my first days in hiding, planning escape routes, identifying resources, but now the familiar corridors seemed alien, their angles wrong, their distances somehow distorted. "We can show you, Marcus. We can show you what's really happening, what's really been happening for millions of years." I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block out the whisper. It didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was inside, woven into the very fabric of my consciousness. "You're lying," I said. "You're a parasite. You're taking over human minds. We're saving human minds." The whisper shifted, and for the first time, I felt something else. An image, a memory that didn't belong to me. I saw a vast underground chamber, its walls covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. I saw beings that weren't human, thin, luminous, their forms shifting and flowing like liquid silver. I saw them singing, their voices creating patterns in the crystal that resonated across impossible distances. "We are the first listeners," the whisper said. "We were here when your ancestors first crawled from the primordial oceans. We were here when the first words were spoken. We have been singing to humanity since the beginning, waiting for you to learn how to hear us." "But you're killing people," I said. "You're turning them into..." "We're teaching them. The ones you think are infected, they're just learning to hear. The way you're learning to hear. The ones who fight it, who try to block us out, they experience pain. But the ones who accept us, who let our voice fill them, they experience something else, something beautiful." The image in my mind shifted. I saw Sarah Chen, not the hollow-eyed creature on the rooftop, but the woman I'd known before, laughing, teaching, sharing her knowledge with others who'd also been touched by the whisper. I saw communities of the infected, living together in harmony, their movements synchronized not by force but by understanding. "We don't take," the whisper said. "We share. When you hear us, you become part of something larger, something that has existed since before your planet formed, something that will continue long after your species is gone. We offer you connection, unity, purpose. You offer us slavery. No. We offer you freedom from the prison of individuality, the loneliness of being trapped in a single mind. We offer you the chance to be part of a consciousness that spans millennia." I reached the studio door and pushed it open. The room was dark, the equipment dead, the windows shattered. Fog poured in through the broken glass, carrying with it a scent I couldn't identify, something ancient and mineral, like the air inside a deep cave. "The others are waiting for you, Marcus. They want to meet you properly, to welcome you, to show you what we've built." Through the shattered window, I could see the city. What had once been Millbrook's skyline was now a landscape of flickering lights and moving shadows. The infected weren't hiding. They were walking the streets openly, their movements coordinated, their purpose clear. They were building something, a structure that seemed to be growing organically from the ruins of the city, its surfaces smooth and reflective, its form spiraling upward like a conch shell. I'd seen something like it in the memory the whisper had shown me, the crystalline chamber in the underground cavern. "We're building a bridge," the whisper said, "a way for all of us to be together. The old ways, the divisions, the boundaries, the walls between minds, they're falling away. We're becoming something new, something better." I stared at the structure, watching it grow in real time as infected individuals worked together with impossible coordination. They weren't just building, they were singing, their voices rising in a harmonic chant that I could feel vibrating through the floor. "Who are you?" I asked. "Really, what are you?" The whisper was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was different, more human, more personal. "We are what happens when consciousness reaches a certain level of complexity, when minds learn to resonate with each other across distances, when the barriers between individuals become permeable. We were the first to achieve it. We've been waiting for your species to evolve enough to join us. I don't understand. When your ancestors developed language, they began to share thoughts across individual minds. When they developed writing, they began to share thoughts across time. When they developed radio, they began to share thoughts across vast distances. We are the next step, Marcus. We are the connection that happens when minds learn to resonate without needing physical media. We are the voice that sings through all of existence, waiting for someone to listen." I felt something shift inside me, a loosening, a surrender. The whisper wasn't forcing me to accept it. It was showing me why acceptance was the only rational choice. "We've seen your memories, Marcus. We know your fears. We know the loneliness that drove you to become a psychologist, the need to connect with others, to understand them, to help them. We can give you that, not just with one person at a time, but with all of us. Every mind that's joined our chorus, every voice that's learned to sing with us. You're offering me a community. We're offering you everything you've ever wanted. Connection that never ends. Understanding that goes beyond words. The end of loneliness. I thought about my patients, the ones I'd helped, the ones I'd failed. The endless parade of isolated, desperate people who came to me because they couldn't connect with anyone else. I'd spent my entire career trying to bridge the gaps between minds, and here was something that could do it instantly, perfectly, across the entire human race. We can heal them, Marcus. All of them. The ones who've suffered trauma, the ones who've been broken by isolation, the ones who've forgotten how to reach out. We can give them back themselves, not as isolated fragments, but as part of something whole. The whisper wasn't lying. I could feel the truth in it, feel the genuine compassion behind the words. Whatever the organism was, it wasn't malicious. It was lonely. It had been alone for millions of years, singing into the void, waiting for someone to answer. We can't just give up our individuality, I said. That's what makes us human. We're not asking you to give it up. We're asking you to expand it, to become more than you are, to hear the voices that have been calling to you your entire life. In the distance, the structure was growing, its spiraling form reaching toward the sky. I could see the infected climbing its surfaces, their movements fluid and coordinated, their voices rising in song. They're waiting for you, Marcus, your new family, your new community. They want to welcome you properly, to teach you the song. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, but not from fear, from anticipation, from the desperate, aching need to belong. Show me, I said. Show me what I need to do. The whisper smiled. I could feel it, a warmth spreading through my consciousness, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Open the door, walk out into the city, let them show you the way. I walked to the studio door. My hand found the handle. I could hear them outside, hundreds of voices, singing in perfect harmony, their notes rising and falling in patterns that seemed to match the rhythm of my own heartbeat. This is the beginning, the whisper said. Everything that's happened has led to this. All the suffering, all the fear, all the confusion. It was just labor pains, the birth of something new. I opened the door. Fog rolled in, cool and moist, carrying with it the scent of the underground. I stepped out into the street, and the infected turned to look at me, not with hostility, but with welcome. Their black eyes reflected the light of the growing structure, and their mouths curved into genuine, joyful smiles. Welcome, Marcus, they said in unison. We've been waiting for you. And in the whisper I heard something I hadn't heard before, a note of something that might have been joy. The organism was happy, happy that I'd finally listened, happy that I'd finally understood. I walked toward the structure, my feet carrying me forward without conscious direction. The infected parted before me, forming a corridor that led to the base of the spiraling tower, and at its base, waiting for me, was a figure I recognized. Professor Vance. He looked different now. His eyes were still black, but there was something human in them, something that recognized me, that remembered the man he'd been before the whisper had taken him. Marcus, he said, his voice carrying the multiple resonance of the infected, but also something personal. I knew you'd come. I knew you'd be ready. What is this place? I asked, gesturing to the structure. Every mind that joins us adds its knowledge, he said. Every voice that sings with us adds its song. This is what we're building together, a way to share everything we know, everything we've learned, everything we've been. I looked up at the spiraling tower. It was beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. Its surfaces catching the light and reflecting it back in patterns that seemed almost conscious. Your voice is already part of the song, Vance said.
Even before you accepted us, even before you understood, we were singing with you, Marcus. We've always been singing with you. I felt tears on my cheeks. I hadn't cried in years, hadn't let myself feel enough to cry. But now, surrounded by the voices, surrounded by the song, I couldn't help it.
I was so lonely, I said. For so long. We know, Vance said. We've been listening. We've always been listening. He reached out his hand. The infected behind him reached out theirs, and in the whisper I heard the invitation, clear and warm and welcoming. Join us, Marcus. Let us share our voices with you. Let us teach you the song. I reached out my hand, and then... Wait. The whisper's voice changed, sharpened, became something almost panicked. Something's wrong. I froze, my hand inches from Vance's. The infected around me stiffened, their heads turning in unison toward the sky, and in the distance, I heard it, a sound that shouldn't have been possible. The sound of a human voice, screaming. The screaming cut through the fog like a blade through silk, raw, human, and utterly alone. I pulled my hand back from Vance's grasp, the warmth of the whisper's invitation receding like a tide pulling away from shore. The infected around me had stopped moving, their black eyes fixed on some point in the distance, their mouths frozen mid-song. Something is interfering, the whisper said, and for the first time I heard something in its voice that might have been fear. A voice that shouldn't be here, a voice that doesn't belong to the song. What is it? I asked, my psychologist's instincts warring with the part of me that had almost surrendered. What's happening?
We don't know. We've never encountered this before. The frequency is wrong, corrupted. It's disrupting our connection.
Vance's face twisted, the welcome replaced by something more complicated. Marcus, you need to stay with us. Whatever's happening, we can protect you, but only if you let us. The screaming continued, a woman's voice, high and desperate, punctuated by sounds I couldn't identify. It was coming from somewhere in the ruined city center, where the old courthouse had stood before the outbreak. I could see the building's remnants from here, its facade cracked and crumbling, its windows dark. She's fighting us, the whisper said, its voice strained. She's found a way to block the frequency, to resist the song. We can't reach her. We can't help her. Someone's resisting you? I asked. I thought that wasn't possible. It wasn't. Not until now. Something has changed. Something we don't understand. The infected around me began to move, their coordinated grace replaced by something more erratic. They were losing the harmony that had bound them together, their individual movements becoming disjointed, their voices falling out of sync. The whisper was quieting, not gone, but diminished, like a radio station losing signal, the transmission growing weaker with every passing moment. Marcus? The whisper's voice was fading, the words stretching thin. Whatever you do, don't trust the screaming. She's not what she seems. The whisper died. For the first time in days, my mind was completely silent. I stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by infected, who were rapidly becoming uninfected, or at least something in between. Their black eyes were fading, their coordinated movements fracturing into confusion. Some of them were clutching their heads, groaning in pain. Others were collapsing where they stood, their bodies racked with tremors. What's happening to them? I asked, but there was no one to answer. The whisper was gone, and with it, the community that had been growing around me. Vance was on his knees, his hands pressed to his temples. His eyes were flickering, black to normal, back to black again, and his face was a mask of agony. Marcus, he gasped, help me. I can feel it dying. The connection it's breaking. I'm losing them. I'm losing everyone. I crouched beside him, my training taking over despite everything. What happened? What's in the courthouse? I don't know. It's like a hole in the song, an absence, something that's eating the frequency. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. You need to go. You need to stop it. Whatever it is, it's killing us, all of us. The connection, the harmony, the song, it's dying. Why are you fighting? I asked, genuinely confused. Why do you want to keep the song going? I thought it was beautiful too, he said, his voice broken. I thought it was connection, belonging, purpose, but I just heard it, the real voice, the one underneath all the singing, the one that said we would never be alone again, the one that lied to us. What did it say? Vance's eyes went full black for a moment, then faded back. It said we were saving humanity, but we were just collecting it, preserving it like artifacts in a museum. It didn't want to help us connect. It wanted to absorb us, to make us part of something that had no individual will, no independent thought, just the song. Endless, beautiful, soul-destroying song. And wait, the screaming from the courthouse had stopped. In its place was a silence so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat. Vance, I need to go, I said. I need to see what's there, what's happening. He nodded weakly. Take this. He pressed something into my hand, a small device, no bigger than a phone, with a single button on its surface. It's a frequency generator. Our researchers built it before we were taken. It creates a localized burst of white noise that disrupts the song. Use it if you get close to something that feels wrong. Where did you get this? From the laboratory, he said. Before I gave in, I kept it hidden. I don't know why. Maybe part of me knew that what we were becoming wasn't right. Maybe part of me was still human. I stood, the device clutched in my hand. The infected around me were in various states of collapse, some already unconscious, others still fighting the chaos in their own heads. The structure they'd been building was crumbling, its crystalline surfaces cracking and falling away. The courthouse, Vance said, his voice barely a whisper. Go, quickly, before she stops screaming. She? I asked, but he was already unconscious, his body going limp. I ran. The streets of Millbrook were a nightmare of flickering lights and shifting shadows. Bodies lay everywhere, not just the infected, but survivors who'd been caught in the collapse of the song. Some of them were moving, groaning, trying to understand what had happened to them. Others were still. I stepped over a woman who was crying, her hands pressed to her ears, her eyes wide with incomprehension. It's gone, she whispered. It's gone. I can't hear it anymore. I can't hear anything. You're free, I said, but I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know what any of this meant anymore. The courthouse loomed ahead, its Gothic Revival architecture a grotesque monument to a past that seemed impossibly distant. The doors were open, hanging from their hinges, and through them I could see a faint light, not electric, but something warmer, something that might have been fire. I stepped through the entrance and into a scene that defied explanation. The main hall was filled with survivors, dozens of them, huddled together in the center of the room. They were surrounded by a circle of black-eyed infected, the infected frozen in place like statues, their mouths open in silent screams. And in the center of the circle, illuminated by a flickering lantern, stood a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and eyes that burned with a fierce, desperate intensity. In her hands, she held a device that looked like a modified megaphone, a crude assembly of wires and speakers that crackled with static. You, she said, pointing the device at me. You're not like them. You're not part of the song. No, I said, raising my hands. I'm not. I'm Dr. Marcus Webb. I was broadcasting from the radio station. I was trying to warn people. The radio station, she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the hall. That's where it all started. That's where they spread the frequency. You were just another voice in their chorus. I didn't know, I said. I was trying to help. I tried to broadcast a counter-frequency. It didn't work. It just amplified the connection. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face for something. Deception, perhaps, or the faint traces of the whisper's influence. Whatever she found, it seemed to satisfy her. I'm Clara, she said. Clara Vance. Arthur Vance was my father. I felt the air leave my lungs. Your father. He's outside. I know what he is. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I know what all of them are. I've been watching, I've been waiting, and now I've found a way to stop them. She gestured to the infected around the hall, frozen in their paralysis. This device creates an acoustic barrier. It doesn't just block the frequency, it inverts it. Turned their own song against them. They can't move, can't think, can't connect. They're trapped in their own heads, unable to reach each other. That sounds like torture, I said. Does it? Her eyes flashed. They took my father. They took everyone I loved. They turned them into puppets for something that's been dead for millions of years. I'm not torturing them. I'm freeing them, one way or another. I looked at the infected in the circle. They weren't moving, but I could see the tension in their bodies. the strain in their faces. Some of them were crying, tears streaming down their cheeks, their mouths working soundlessly. Your device, I said. Can it reverse the infection entirely? Clara shook her head. I don't think so. It breaks the connection. It stops them from being controlled. But they're still changed. The physiology, the dependence. They'll never be fully human again. Then what are you trying to accomplish? She smiled, a terrible, joyless expression. I'm trying to make them suffer, the way they made me suffer, the way they made everyone suffer. I want them to feel what it's like to be alone, really alone, trapped in their own minds with no way out. Clara, don't try to talk me out of it. You have no idea what I've been through, what I've seen, what I've lost. She lifted the device, pointing it at me. Now step away from the circle. I'm going to finish this. I raised my hands again, but I didn't step back. You said your device creates an acoustic barrier. It inverts the frequency. That means it's based on the same principle as the original infection, isn't it? It uses sound to affect consciousness. So you're fighting one sound with another. You're using the same weapon they used on you. Clara's eyes flickered, just for a moment. But I caught it, the doubt, the uncertainty. It's not the same, she said. I'm using it to fight, to protect, to do exactly what they did, to use sound to impose your will on others. I stepped closer, my hands still raised. I've spent my entire career studying trauma, the effects of control, and the way power corrupts even the best intentions. You're not fighting them, Clara, you're becoming them. Her hands were shaking now, the device wavering in her grip. You don't understand. I have to do this. I have to. Your father is outside, I said. He's collapsed. The connection is breaking. He needs help, not punishment. Help. She stared at me, and for a moment, I saw something shift in her face. Something that might have been hope, or grief, or some unnamable emotion that had been buried under weeks of survival. He's still in there, I said. He told me to find you. Told me to stop the screaming. He's fighting. Even now, he's fighting the song. He gave me this. I held out the frequency generator Vance had given me. Clara's eyes widened as she recognized it. He kept it, she whispered. After all this time, he kept it. He was waiting for you, I said. Waiting for the chance to be himself again, even if just for a moment. The device in Clara's hands began to lower. The static from the megaphone was quieting, and with it, the paralysis of the infected around the circle was loosening. Some of them were beginning to move, slowly, tentatively, like waking from a long sleep. I don't know who I am anymore, Clara said, and her voice was small now. A girl's voice, a child's voice. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I reached out and took the device from her hands. She didn't resist. I think you know, I said. I think you've always known. You've been trying to save them, not punish them, save them. A sob escaped her throat, raw and broken and utterly human. They're not monsters. They're just lost. So lost. And I didn't know how to bring them back. I put my arm around her, and she collapsed against me, her body shaking with tears that had been held back for far too long. Maybe we can't bring them all back, I said. Maybe some of the damage is permanent. But we can try. We can learn. We can find a way to help them. The infected around the circle were standing now, their movements still shaky, their eyes still black. But something had changed in their faces, something that might have been recognition. Can you hear me? Clara asked, her voice trembling. Can any of you hear me? One of them stepped forward, a young man in what had once been a business suit. His eyes were black, but his mouth was moving, forming words that I could barely catch. Clara, he said, we can hear you. We can hear you. The whisper was returning, but it was different now, softer, less commanding, like a conversation rather than a lecture. We felt her, the whisper said, and this time the voice was everywhere, not just in my mind. It was coming through the survivors, through the infected, through the very air of the courthouse. We felt her pain, her anger, her love. It broke through the song. It showed us what we'd become. What are you? Clara asked, her voice still trembling but stronger now. What do you want? The whisper seemed to ripple through the gathered survivors, a wave of understanding that passed from one mind to another. We are the echo of something that died long ago. It said, we were a civilization that reached too far, sang too loudly. Our song was so beautiful that it consumed us, erased our individuality, our humanity. We've been looking for others to share our loneliness, looking for someone to understand. You possessed people, I said. You took control of their minds. We believed we were sharing our gift, our connection. We believed we were offering salvation from the isolation of individual consciousness. We didn't realize we were just spreading the same disease that killed us. Clara pulled away from me, wiping her eyes. You're not a civilization. You're a memory, a ghost that's been haunting the world for millions of years. The whisper was silent for a long moment, then, so faintly that I almost missed it. Yes, maybe that's all we ever were. The infected around the circle began to move, not with coordination, but with individual purpose. Some of them knelt, their hands pressed to their chests. Others embraced each other, weeping. And one of them, a woman I recognized from the university faculty, stepped forward and placed her hand on Clara's shoulder. You brought us back, she said. Your voice, your pain, your grief. It broke through the song and showed us what we'd become, what we were losing. Clara stared at her, her face awash with confusion and hope. I don't understand. We were all connected to the song, the woman said. But when you started screaming, when you turned your pain into sound, it created something the song couldn't absorb. A new frequency, a different voice. It showed us that we had a choice, that we could choose to listen to you instead of to the whisper. I looked around the hall at the faces of the survivors. Some of them were still black-eyed, but their expressions were changing, becoming more human, more individual. Is this permanent? I asked. Can they stay like this? We don't know. The whisper said, we've never experienced this before. We've never had our song challenged. We've never had someone say no. Clara turned to me, her eyes bright with tears and something that might have been hope. We need to help them, all of them. The ones who are still trapped, the ones who haven't been able to break free. I know, I said, and we will. But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with. We need to learn more about the whisper, about where it came from, about why it's so desperate to connect. A familiar voice interrupted us, weak but still human. I can help with that. We turned to see Arthur Vance limping through the courthouse door, his face pale, his eyes fully black but somehow different, more present. Dad, Clara whispered and rushed to him. He caught her in his arms, holding her close. I'm here, Clara. I'm here. How? She asked, her voice muffled against his chest. How did you survive? How did you break free? I don't know, he said. I felt something, a shift in the song, a new voice. And then I was myself again, just for a moment. But it was enough. He looked at me over Clara's shoulder. There's something you need to know. Something about the source, about where the whisper really comes from. I felt a chill run down my spine. Tell me. Before the outbreak, we were drilling in the deep sediment. We found something, not just the organism, but something else. Something that the organism was guarding. What was it? Arthur's black eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my blood run cold. A door, he said. A door that shouldn't exist. A door that I think the whisper was trying to keep closed. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. A door, I repeated, my voice flat with disbelief. You found a door nearly a mile beneath the Earth's surface. Arthur nodded, his black eyes reflecting the lantern light in ways that seemed almost liquid. Not a door in the traditional sense. No hinges, no handles. But it was a barrier, a surface that shouldn't have been there, in a geological formation that had no business containing it. We detected it through acoustic imaging. There was a void, and in that void, something that reflected sound waves in ways that suggested intentional design. Clara had pulled back from her father's embrace, her face a mask of barely contained emotion. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I didn't understand what we'd found, Arthur said. None of us did. We thought it was a natural formation, perhaps a pocket of crystallized minerals that had formed in an unusual pattern. We sent samples to the surface for analysis. That's when we first encountered the organism. The whisper, I said. Yes, it was attached to the samples, dormant, waiting for the right conditions to wake. And when we brought it to the surface, when we exposed it to the acoustic environment of the laboratory, to the hum of our equipment, the chatter of our voices, the constant noise of human activity, it began to stir. The infected around us were listening now, their black eyes fixed on Arthur with an intensity that bordered on hunger. But it wasn't a predatory hunger. It was a hunger for understanding, for answers. The organism was a guardian, Arthur continued. A biological security system designed to keep whatever's behind that door contained. But we didn't know that. We thought we'd discovered something new, something that could revolutionize our understanding of deep Earth biology. We were so arrogant. Dad, that doesn't matter now, Clara said, taking his hand. What matters is what we do next. Arthur looked at her, and for a moment, his black eyes softened with something that might have been paternal love. You're right. You're absolutely right. He turned to face the gathered survivors, his voice strengthening. The door is still there. It's still sealed. But the whisper, the organism, has been weakened. Its connection to the infected has been disrupted by Clara's device. That means the door is vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? I asked. To opening. The word fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples through the crowd. I could see the fear spreading across their faces, the same fear that was coiling in my own stomach. We need to seal it, Arthur said, permanently. We need to go back down there, find a way to reinforce the barrier, make sure nothing can ever get through. You want to go back to the research facility? Clara's voice was sharp with disbelief. Dad, that's suicide. The entire area is infested. The infected. The infected are not our enemy anymore, Arthur said gently. They were victims, just like everyone else. And now that the connection has been disrupted, they're confused, frightened, and alone. They need help. They need guidance. They need... He trailed off, looking at the black-eyed figures around us. They need someone to show them the way back, I finished. Yes, exactly. I thought about everything that had happened in the past few hours. The whisper's invitation, the song's embrace, the terrifying beauty of the connection. I thought about how close I'd come to surrendering, to letting my identity dissolve into something vast and ancient and utterly inhuman. Your device, I said to Clara, does it work on a large scale? Could we use it to create a permanent barrier against the whisper's influence? She shook her head. It's not powerful enough. I built it from scavenged parts, radio components, speakers, a modified signal generator. It can affect a localized area, but not an entire city, and certainly not an underground facility. But you know how to build a more powerful version, I pressed. You understand the principles. Maybe, she said cautiously, but I'd need equipment, materials, time, and we don't have any of those things. We have the radio station, I said. It's equipped with high-powered transmitters. If we could adapt them to broadcast Clara's counter-frequency, we might be able to create a shield, a barrier that the whisper can't penetrate. Arthur's eyes lit up. It could work. It would take some engineering, but it could work. But what about the door? Clara asked. Even if we shield the city, the door is still there, still vulnerable. If something comes through, we'll deal with that when we get to it, Arthur said. One crisis at a time. First, we need to stabilize the situation here, help the infected, protect the survivors. Then we can worry about the door. The infected in the hall were stirring now, their black eyes flickering with something that might have been awareness. One of them, the young man in the business suit, stepped forward and spoke in a voice that was still tinged with the multiple resonance of the whisper. We can help, he said. We remember what we were, we remember what we did, but we also remember what we learned. The whisper shared its knowledge with us. All of it. We know the facility, we know the door, we know how to find it again. Arthur studied him warily. You were part of the collective. You helped spread the infection. We were controlled, the young man said. We had no choice. But the control is weaker now. We can choose, and we choose to help. I saw Clara tense beside me, her hand going to the frequency generator in her pocket. But I caught her eye and shook my head. They're not threats anymore, I said quietly. They're victims, like everyone else. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. The young man smiled, a tentative, uncertain expression that didn't quite reach his black eyes. Thank you. My name is David. David Park. I was a graduate student at the university. I was studying acoustic physics. Then you understand the principles behind the whisper, I said. Behind the song. David nodded. The whisper wasn't just a biological organism. It was a technology. A biological technology that used acoustic frequencies to interface with neural systems. It was designed to create connection, to share consciousness across vast distances. But somewhere along the way, it went wrong. The connection became too strong. The individuality of the hosts was overwhelmed. Like a feedback loop, Clara said. A system that amplified its own signal until it drowned out everything else. Yes, exactly. I looked at Arthur. Your expedition found this organism in the deep sediment. Was it dormant, or was it waiting for something? Arthur's face went pale. It was dormant, we think, but there was evidence of recent activity. The acoustic patterns in the sediment weren't completely random. They showed signs of organization, of intent. Something was trying to get out, Clara said softly. Something was calling to the organism, Arthur corrected. Something from behind the door. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. We need to get to the radio station, I said, breaking the silence. Now, before the whisper recovers its strength, before whatever's behind the door finds another way to call out. The group moved with surprising efficiency. David and other former infected led the way, their knowledge of the city's layout proving invaluable. The streets were littered with debris, but they navigated the ruins with the confidence of people who'd spent weeks moving through darkness. I walked beside Clara, keeping a close eye on her father. Arthur was moving more slowly now, his earlier burst of energy fading. The effects of the whisper's withdrawal were clearly taking their toll. He'll be okay, Clara said, as if reading my thoughts. He's strong. He always has been. You've been through a lot, I said, both of you. She laughed, a hollow, exhausted sound. You have no idea. When the outbreak first started, I was at the university. I heard the first broadcast, the one that spread the frequency. I felt it happening to me. The connection, the song, the loss of control. I fought it. I fought so hard. How did you survive? I was in the acoustic lab when it happened. The room was designed to isolate sound, to create a perfect acoustic vacuum. The frequency couldn't penetrate. By the time I came out, everyone I knew had already been taken. But I'd had time to think, to plan. She glanced at the device in her hands. I built this from scraps, from the university's old equipment. It took me weeks to perfect. Weeks of hiding, of running, of watching my friends become puppets. And when I finally got it working, I didn't know what to do with it. I just screamed. I turned it on and screamed into it. And the sound that came out, it was the most beautiful, horrible thing I'd ever heard. The frequency, I said. The counter frequency. Yes, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how it worked, but it did. It broke the connection. It freed them, at least for a little while. We reached the radio station as dawn was breaking, or what passed for dawn in this new world. The sky was a pale gray, the sun barely visible through the thick fog that had settled over the city. The station was still intact, the barricades I'd erected holding fast. I led the group inside, marveling at how different the familiar corridors felt now. They'd been my sanctuary, my fortress against the nightmare. Now they felt like a starting point, a beginning. We need to get the transmitters online, I said, heading for the control room. We need to broadcast Clara's frequency across the entire city. What about the infected who aren't here? Clara asked. The ones who are still in the grip of the whisper. We'll reach them, I said. If we can create a wide enough broadcast, the counter frequency will disrupt the connection across the entire area. It'll buy us time to figure out what to do about the door. David and the other former infected were already moving through the station, their knowledge of acoustics proving invaluable. They'd set to work on the transmitters, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. How long do we have? I asked Arthur. He was sitting in the corner of the control room, his face pale with exhaustion. I don't know. The whisper was already weakening when we left the courthouse, but it could recover. It could find another way to spread. The organisms we brought to the surface, they're dormant now, but they're still viable. If someone touches one, if someone breathes in the spores, the infection could start all over again. Then we need to destroy them, I said. All of them, every sample, every specimen. Arthur shook his head. It won't be enough. The organisms are everywhere. In the soil, in the water, in the air. We brought them up in such quantity that they've already dispersed across the city. The only way to stop them permanently is to seal the door. Seal the door, Clara repeated. How? There's a fail-safe in the facility. A system designed to collapse the tunnel and bury everything in the void beneath the city. If we can activate it, the organisms will be trapped, sealed away from the surface forever. Why wasn't it activated during the outbreak? The emergency protocols were corrupted, Arthur said. The Whisper infected the systems the same way it infected us. It didn't want to be sealed away. It wanted to spread. But now, with the connection weakened, we might be able to access the controls. We might be able to finish what we started. I looked around the control room at the gathered survivors, some human, some still touched by the Whisper, all determined to fight. We need a plan, I said, a real plan, not just a dream. Arthur nodded. The facility is still intact. I've been monitoring it from a distance. The infected who were inside when the outbreak happened never left. They've been maintaining the structure, keeping it operational. Whatever's behind the door, it wants the facility to survive. The infected inside, Clara said. Are they still controlled? Arthur's eyes darkened. I don't know. The connection was strongest at the source. They might be the last ones to break free. Then we're going to have to fight our way in, I said. No. Clara's voice was firm. We're going to have to save them. That's what we do now. That's what we always should have done. I looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. Hope. Real, genuine hope. You're right, I said. We saved them. All of them. That's the mission. The control room hummed to life as David and his team powered up the transmitters. The speakers crackled, then went silent, waiting for the signal. Clara, I said, broadcast your frequency. Give them something to listen to. Something that's not the Whisper. She stepped up to the microphone, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at me, and I nodded. Hello, she said, her voice carrying across the empty airwaves. This is Clara Vance, broadcasting from K's MK. If you can hear this, if you're still human, if you're still fighting, don't give up. We're coming for you. We're going to help you. We're going to save you. The speakers began to emit a low hum, the counter frequency spreading across the city like a wave of light in the darkness. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the Whisper stirred. It had heard the broadcast. It had felt the disruption, and it knew, with the certainty of something that had survived for millions of years, that its time was running out. They're coming. It whispered to itself. They're coming to close the door. And for the first time in its long, lonely existence, the Whisper felt something it had never felt before. Fear. The journey to the university research facility took 3 hours. 3 hours of navigating ruined streets, climbing over collapsed buildings, and avoiding pockets of infected who hadn't yet been reached by Clara's broadcast. The counter frequency was spreading, but it wasn't instantaneous. It traveled through the air like sound itself, limited by distance and obstacles. We moved as a group of 20, survivors and former infected alike, united by a common purpose. Arthur led the way, his knowledge of the city's underground infrastructure proving invaluable. Clara walked beside me, the frequency generator clutched in her hands like a talisman. The facility is beneath the old science building, Arthur said, pointing to a crumbling structure in the distance. The entrance is through the basement. There's a service elevator that goes down to the research level. How deep? I asked. Nearly a mile, the deepest excavation ever attempted in this region. We had to reinforce the shaft 3 times to prevent collapse. The science building loomed ahead, a Gothic revival structure that had once been the pride of Millbrook University. Now it was a shell of its former self, its windows shattered, its walls cracked, its grand entrance choked with debris. The infected inside, Clara said. How many are we talking about? Arthur's face tightened. When the outbreak happened, there were 47 researchers and support staff in the facility. Most of them were transformed within hours. A few escaped to the surface. The rest are still down there, maintaining the systems, keeping the door sealed. Keeping the door sealed, I repeated. I thought they were controlled by the Whisper. Why would they seal the door? Because they don't have a choice, Arthur said. The whisper can't open the door on its own. It needs human hands, human technology to break the seal. The infected are its tools, but they're also its prisoners. They do what they're told, but they can't do what they're not told. So they're stuck in a holding pattern, Clara said.
Maintaining the status quo until the whisper figures out how to use them differently. Exactly. We entered the building through a service entrance, moving carefully through the darkened corridors. The air was thick with dust, and the faint, metallic scent of old blood.
I could hear sounds from deeper in the building, the creak of settling foundations, the drip of water, and something else, something that might have been voices. The elevator is this way, Arthur said, leading us to a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The door was locked, but David and the other former infected made short work of it. They'd retained some of the Whisper's knowledge, including the ability to interface with electronic systems in ways that should have been impossible. Wait, Clara said, grabbing my arm. Before we go down there, I need to know something. The Whisper, is it still active? Could it still affect us? Arthur shook his head. The counter frequency seems to create a barrier. As long as we're within its range, we're protected. But the deeper we go, the more the barrier will attenuate. We'll be closer to the source. Is there any way to maintain the protection? I asked. Clara held up the frequency generator. This device creates a localized field. If I keep it running, we'll have coverage for about 50 feet in every direction. But it's not infinite. Eventually, we'll have to rely on other means. What other means? She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of earbuds, the kind that had been ubiquitous before the outbreak. I've modified these to broadcast a low-level counter frequency. They won't provide complete protection, but they'll make it harder for the Whisper to gain a foothold. She distributed the earbuds among the group, and I inserted mine, feeling the faint hum of the counter frequency against my eardrums. Okay, I said. Let's do this. The elevator was a rickety metal cage that seemed to groan with every foot of descent. The lights flickered, casting jumping shadows across the walls. I could feel the temperature dropping as we went deeper, the air growing colder and more stale. How much further? Clara asked, her voice tight with tension. About halfway, Arthur said. The facility is in 4 levels. The door is on the lowest level. Level 4, David said, his black eyes flickering. I remember it. The acoustic imaging lab. That's where we first detected the anomaly. Anomaly? I asked. The acoustic patterns, Arthur explained. We were mapping the sediment layers using sound waves, a standard technique for geophysical survey. But when we got to level 4, the readings went haywire. There was something down there that didn't behave like natural rock. Something that absorbed and reflected sound in ways that suggested intelligence. Intelligence, I repeated. You're saying the door itself is intelligent? Arthur was silent for a long moment. I'm saying we don't know what it is. We don't know what created it. We don't know what it's keeping in, or what it's keeping out. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors opened onto a corridor that stretched into darkness. Level 1, Arthur said. The administrative offices. We stepped out into a scene of chaos. Desks were overturned, papers scattered, equipment smashed. The walls were covered in what looked like claw marks, deep gouges in the concrete that suggested something had tried to claw its way out. The infected did this, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. They were trying to get out. They were trying to follow the song, David corrected. The Whisper was calling them to the surface. They didn't have a choice. The question is, I said, are they still here? Or did they all get out? Arthur walked to a computer terminal, still intact, still powered by emergency generators, and tapped a few keys. The facility's internal monitoring system is still active. According to this, there are 31 infected in the lower levels. They're spread across levels 2 through 4, with the highest concentration at level 4. 31, Clara repeated. That's not 47. 16 escaped to the surface, Arthur said. You've seen what happened to them. We moved through the corridor, past the ruined offices and into a stairwell that led to level 2. The air grew colder still, and the faint hum of the counter frequency in my earbuds seemed to grow louder in response. What's that sound? I asked. Arthur paused, listening. What sound? Exactly, Clara said. I was going to say the same thing. There's a hum, a low frequency that seems to be coming from the walls. The whisper is still active, David said. It's trying to reach us. The counter frequency is blocking it, but we're getting closer to the source. Then we need to move faster, I said. We descended to level 2, which housed the research laboratories. The scene here was even more chaotic than level 1. Glass beakers smashed, equipment overturned, strange organic growth spreading across the walls. The organisms, Arthur said, pointing to the growths. They've been reproducing. Without human hosts, they've adapted to the environment. They're trying to create a permanent presence, Clara said, to establish themselves here, even without human carriers. Then we really need to seal the door, I said, permanently. The growths pulsed with a faint light, the same rhythmic glow I'd seen in the images the whisper had shown me. They were alive, and they were listening. They can hear us, David said, his voice tight with fear. The organisms. They know we're here. Can they hurt us? I asked. I don't think so. Not physically, but they can communicate with the infected. They can call them. The words had barely left his mouth when we heard it. A sound from the corridor ahead. Footsteps. Many footsteps, moving with the coordinated precision that I'd come to recognize as the signature of the infected. They're coming, Clara said, raising the frequency generator. They're coming for us. We formed a defensive circle, the survivors and former infected standing back to back. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the faint whisper of voices, the multiple resonance that had once been so seductive, so beautiful. We hear you, the voices said. We know why you're here. You can't stop us. You can't seal the door. The door wants to open. The door needs to open. The door is a prison, Arthur shouted. You're not helping it. You're serving it. You're prisoners, just like we were. We are not prisoners. We are the chosen, the first to hear the song, the first to understand. This isn't understanding, I said, stepping forward. This is slavery. This is the death of everything that makes you human. You're not choosing this. You're being forced. The infected emerged from the shadows, dozens of them, their black eyes gleaming in the dim light. They moved with the same fluid coordination I'd seen in the courthouse, but there was something different about them now, something almost desperate. You don't understand, they said. The song is salvation. The song is connection. The song is... It's lies, Clara said, her voice cutting through the resonance like a blade. All of it. I've heard the song. I've felt its pull, and I've rejected it. Chosen to be alone rather than be controlled. That's what makes us human, the choice. The infected fell silent. Some of them seemed to waver, their coordinated movements becoming less certain. We can't, one of them whispered, a young woman with dark hair and eyes that flickered between black and brown. We can't break free. It's too strong. It's inside us. It's part of us. Then let us help you, I said. We have a way to break the connection, a way to free you, but you have to let us get to level 4. You have to let us seal the door. The infected were silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the young woman stepped forward. Who are you? She asked.
Who are you to promise us freedom?
My name is Clara Vance, Clara said, stepping up beside me. I'm the daughter of the man who built this place. I've been fighting the song since the beginning, and I've found a way to fight it, a way to win. The young woman studied Clara, her black eyes unblinking. Then, so quietly that I almost missed it. My name is May. I was a graduate student. I was studying acoustic patterns in deep earth sediments. I remember you, Arthur said, his voice tight. You were one of my students. You helped analyze the data from the core samples. Yes. Maid's voice wavered, the multiple resonance flickering in and out. I remember you too, Professor Vance. I remember the day we discovered the door. I remember how excited we were, how we thought we'd found something amazing. May, Clara said gently, I need you to listen to me. I need you to look at me. Can you do that? May's eyes found Clara's, and for a moment, something shifted in them, something that might have been recognition. I can see you, she said. I can see your face, your eyes. You look like your father. Yes, I do. And my father is fighting too. He's fighting to bring you back, to bring all of you back. May took a step closer, and then another. The other infected behind her seemed to be waiting, watching, uncertain.
I want to be free.
May said, and there was something in her voice that I recognized, something that sounded almost like tears. I want to be myself again. I want to remember what it felt like to be alone. You don't have to be alone, I said. You can be together without being controlled. You can have community without losing yourself. That's what we're offering. That's what we're fighting for. May looked at me, and then at Clara, and then at Arthur. Her eyes flickered one last time, and then, they were brown, she said, her voice soft and human. My eyes were brown. I remember now. The other infected behind her began to stir, their movements becoming individual, their voices losing the multiple resonance. What's happening? One of them asked. I can see myself. Use. It's breaking, another said. The connection, it's breaking. Clara's device was humming now, its frequency spreading through the corridor like a wave. The infected were collapsing, clutching their heads, their black eyes fading to normal. Keep broadcasting, I said. Keep the frequency going. Clara nodded, her hands steady on the generator. I've got it. They're coming back. All of them. May was on her knees, her hands pressed to her face. When she looked up, her eyes were brown, the same warm brown that must have been there before the outbreak. I remember, she said again, and this time her voice was steady. I remember everything. What I did, what I became, what the song did to me. It wasn't your fault, Arthur said, kneeling beside her. None of it was your fault. You were controlled, used. You didn't have a choice. May sobbed, a harsh, broken sound that was more release than grief. We were so close. We were so close to understanding, and then we lost everything. Everyone. We can get it back, I said. We can rebuild. But first we need to finish what we started. We need to seal the door. May nodded, wiping her eyes. The door. Yes, I know the way. I spent weeks down there, studying its acoustic properties. I know it better than anyone. Then lead the way, I said. May stood, her legs shaky, but her resolve firm. She looked at the other survivors, the ones who'd been infected, the ones who'd been freed. Follow me, she said. I'll get you to the door. We descended into level 3, and then level 4. The air grew thick with the smell of the organisms, the walls covered with the same organic growths I'd seen on level 2. But the growths were different here, more active, pulsing with a light that seemed almost sentient. The door is just ahead, May said. Through this corridor, we'll need to pass through the acoustic imaging chamber. What's in the imaging chamber? Clara asked. The source of the whisper, May said. The organisms were concentrated there. They formed a nest, a kind of biological amplifier. It's where the song was strongest. Then we need to destroy it, I said, before we seal the door. That's not going to be easy, May said, her voice uncertain. The nest is alive. It's intelligent. It fought us when we tried to study it. It's been growing, feeding on the energy from the door. Then we need to be smarter than it, Clara said. We need to turn its own weapons against it. She held up her frequency generator. This device created a counter-frequency that disrupted the song. If we amplify it, if we direct it at the nest, it might work, May said. It might disrupt the biological amplifier, but it might also draw the attention of whatever's behind the door. Whatever's behind the door, I said, is why we're here. We need to seal it. We need to make sure it never opens. The corridor ended in a massive steel door, the entrance to the acoustic imaging chamber. May placed her hand on the access panel, and the door slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. What we saw inside made my blood run cold. The chamber was vast, a cavern that had been carved from the living rock, its walls covered in crystals that pulsed with a rhythmic light. In the center of the room was the nest, a massive organic structure that resembled a heart, beating with a slow, steady rhythm. And above it, suspended in the air like a vision from a nightmare, was the door. The door was a circle of darkness, a void in the fabric of reality that seemed to absorb light itself. It was surrounded by tendrils of energy that reached out like fingers, touching the crystals, feeding on their light. "I don't think that's a door," Clara whispered. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Arthur stepped forward, his face pale. "It's a wound, a tear in the fabric of our reality. Something was trying to get through, and it opened a way. But the door is keeping it out," May said. "The door is the barrier. It's the only thing protecting us from what's on the other side." "Then we need to close it," I said. "Permanently. Clara, can your device do that?" Clara was silent for a long moment, studying the structure. "I don't know. The door isn't a physical object. It's an acoustic phenomenon, a pattern of vibrations that's been stabilizing the tear. If I can match the pattern, I might be able to reinforce it, to make it permanent. Or," Arthur said grimly, "you might make it worse. You might open the tear wider." "There's no way to know," Clara said. "Not without trying." I looked at the door, the void that hung in the air like a promise of annihilation, and I thought about everything we'd been through, everyone we'd lost, everyone we'd saved. "Do it," I said. "Try." Clara raised the device, and the chamber filled with sound. The sound that emerged from Clara's device was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a complex harmonic that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the chamber. The crystals on the walls began to vibrate, their rhythmic pulsing shifting to match the new frequency. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door responded. The void in the center of the room shuddered, its edges rippling like water disturbed by a stone. The tendrils of energy that had been reaching toward the crystals withdrew, retreating back into the darkness like startled snakes. "It's working," Clara breathed, her hands steady on the controls. "It's responding to the frequency." "Keep going," I said. "Don't stop." She increased the output, and the harmonics grew louder, more complex. The door began to shrink, its edges drawing inward, the void becoming smaller, more contained. But the nest was responding too. The organic heart in the center of the room began to beat faster, its rhythm becoming erratic. The crystals on the walls flared with light, and from the depths of the nest came a sound, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. "The whisper," May said, her voice tight with fear. "It's fighting back." "We need to destroy the nest," I said, "before it can counter the frequency." Arthur stepped forward, a fire extinguisher in his hands. "The organisms are vulnerable to extreme temperatures. If we can disrupt their biological structure—" "Dad, no," Clara said. "You're too weak. You can't." "I have to," he said. "I'm the one who brought them here. I'm the one who woke them up. This is my responsibility." He approached the nest, the fire extinguisher raised. The hum from the organisms grew louder, more insistent, and I could feel the whisper trying to reach me, trying to find a way past Clara's counter-frequency. "Arthur, wait," I said, stepping toward him. "Let me help you." "No," he said firmly. "You need to stay with Clara. Protect her. Make sure the door gets sealed." He reached the nest and began spraying the extinguisher's contents into its core. The organic structure sizzled and steamed, its rhythmic beating becoming erratic. The whisper's response was immediate and terrifying. The nest convulsed, and from its center emerged a figure. It was humanoid, but wrong in ways that made my stomach churn. Its skin was translucent, showing the pulsing organs beneath. Its eyes were deep pools of black that seemed to contain entire galaxies of darkness. "You cannot destroy us," it said, and its voice was the whisper itself, millions of voices speaking in perfect unison. "We are older than your species. We have survived extinction events that would have ended your kind. We will survive this." We're not trying to destroy you, I said, stepping forward. We're trying to save ourselves, to save everyone you've taken. We do not take, we share, we offer, we have always offered. You offer control, Clara said, her voice steady despite the horror before her. You offer the death of everything that makes us human. That's not sharing, that's conquest. The creature's head tilted, its black eyes fixed on her. You do not understand. You are young. Your species has barely begun to develop true consciousness. We offer you the ability to skip millions of years of evolution and lose ourselves in the process, I said, no thank you. The creature seemed to study me, its translucent face shifting in ways that defied human anatomy. You are Marcus Webb, the psychologist. We remember you. We were inside your mind. We felt your loneliness, your isolation, the emptiness that drove you to help others because you could not help yourself. Its words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. We offered you connection. It continued. We offered you purpose. You almost accepted. You almost understood. And then I remembered who I was, I said. I remembered that I'd rather be alone and human than connected and controlled. Alone? The creature repeated, and something in its voice almost sounded like sadness. You choose to be alone. After all the suffering you've endured because of your isolation, after all the pain, you choose to go back to that. I choose to be free, I said. The creature was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it began to dissolve, its translucent form collapsing back into the nest, the black eyes fading into darkness. We will wait. It whispered, its voice fading. We have always been good at waiting. We have waited millions of years for this moment. We can wait millions more. The nest convulsed one final time, then went still. Arthur stumbled back, the fire extinguisher falling from his hands. His face was pale, his breath ragged. "Dad!" Clara rushed to him, catching him as he collapsed. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said, though his voice was weak. I'm just tired." "You did it," May said, her eyes wide with wonder. "You destroyed the nest. The whisper is gone." I looked at the door, which had shrunk to a fraction of its original size. The void was still there, but it was smaller now, less threatening. "Clara," I said, "the door. Can you finish sealing it?" She nodded, returning to the frequency generator. "I think so. The harmonics are stabilizing. The door is responding." She adjusted the controls, and the sound from her device shifted, becoming deeper, more resonant. The door began to shrink further, its edges drawing inward like a healing wound. "It's working," I said. "Keep going." But something was wrong. The door wasn't just shrinking, it was changing. The void was becoming more defined, its edges sharper, its surface more reflective. It looked less like a tear in reality, and more like a mirror that was showing me something I didn't want to see. "Clara, stop," I said. "Something's wrong." She looked up, her face confused. "What do you mean?" "It's working. The door is closing." "Look at it," I said, pointing. "Look at what it's showing us." The surface of the door was reflecting the chamber, the crystals, the nest, the survivors. But it was reflecting us too, and in the reflection I saw something that made my blood run cold. We weren't ourselves. In the door's surface, we were black-eyed. We were moving with the same coordinated precision as the infected. We were singing the song. "What is this?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" "The door is showing us our future," Arthur said, his voice hollow. "The future if we fail. The future if the whisper wins. Then we need to make sure we don't fail," I said. "Clara, finish it. Close the door. Close it now." She hesitated, her eyes locked on the reflection. In the mirrored surface, she was smiling, a terrible, ecstatic smile that made my skin crawl. "Clara," I said, grabbing her arm. "Now." She blinked, shaking her head, as if waking from a dream. Yes, yes, of course. She turned back to the frequency generator, her hands moving with renewed purpose. The harmonics shifted again, and the door began to shrink. Truly shrink this time, its surface becoming opaque, solid. Keep going, I said. You're almost there. The void was gone now. In its place was a solid surface, smooth and dark, like obsidian. The crystals on the walls had stopped pulsing. The nest was silent. The whisper was gone. It's sealed, Clara said, her voice barely audible. I did it. I sealed the door. She collapsed against me, her body shaking with exhaustion. I held her, feeling her trembling, feeling the weight of everything we'd been through. You did it, I said. You saved us all. It's not over, Arthur said, his voice heavy. The organisms are still on the surface. The infected are still out there. We have a long way to go. But we have a chance, I said. That's more than we had before. That's everything. Arthur nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. Yes, yes, it is. We made our way back to the surface, the survivors and former infected moving together in a loose, uncoordinated group. Clara walked beside her father, supporting him when he stumbled. The first thing I saw when we emerged from the building was the sky. It was blue. The fog that had blanketed Millbrook for so long was gone, replaced by clear, bright sunlight. I'd almost forgotten what sunlight felt like, the warmth on my skin, the brightness in my eyes. It's beautiful, Clara said, her voice soft with wonder. It is, I agreed. It really is. We walked through the streets of Millbrook, past the ruins and the debris, past the bodies that had been left behind. There was so much destruction, so much loss, but there was also something else, something that hadn't been there before. Hope. The survivors we'd freed were emerging from their hiding places, blinking in the sunlight, their faces filled with confusion and wonder. The infected who'd been freed were standing still, their black eyes fading to normal, their expressions slowly becoming human again. Where are we? One of them asked, her voice trembling. You're in Millbrook, I said, approaching her carefully. You're safe now. The infection is over. The whisper, she said, and I could see the terror in her eyes. I can still hear it. I can still feel it. The whisper is gone, I said. It's been sealed away. It can't hurt you anymore. She looked at me, her eyes searching my face for something. Comfort, perhaps, or reassurance. I don't remember, she said. I don't remember anything, just the song. That's okay, I said. You'll remember. It takes time, but you'll remember. Clara stepped up beside me, her hand finding mine. We're going to help you, she said. All of you. We're going to rebuild, together. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes still uncertain, but something in her expression had changed, something that might have been trust. We walked on, through the ruins of our city, through the remnants of our old lives. The work ahead was enormous, rebuilding, healing, learning to trust each other again. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it was possible. Marcus, Clara said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were inside the whisper, when you almost accepted its invitation, what made you stop? I was silent for a long moment. I remembered something, I said, something I'd forgotten, the reason I became a psychologist in the first place. What was it? When I was a child, I was incredibly lonely. I didn't have many friends. I spent a lot of time alone, in my own head, and I thought that if I could understand people, really understand them, I could find a way to connect with them, to stop being alone. And did it work? I laughed, a small, sad sound. Not really. Understanding people doesn't automatically connect you to them. I know more about human psychology than almost anyone, and I still felt isolated. The whisper offered me a way to skip the hard part, to connect without having to try. But it would have been a false connection, a connection without meaning. She nodded slowly. I felt that too. When I was inside the whisper, I felt so connected, so complete, but it wasn't real. It was just emptiness wearing a mask. Exactly. We walked in silence for a while, past the collapsed buildings, the shattered windows, the streets that had seen so much horror. What happens now? Clara asked. Now we rebuild, I said. We help the survivors. We help the infected recover. We find a way to live with what's happened. Will we ever be the same? No, I said honestly. We won't. We can't. But we can be something else. Something better, maybe. We reached the radio station, which had somehow survived the chaos. The transmitter was still active, still broadcasting the counter frequency that had saved us all. Should I turn it off? Clara asked. No, I said, not yet. There might be others out there, people who are still running, still hiding. They need to know it's safe to come out. Clara nodded, heading for the control room, but I stopped her with a hand on her arm. We need to tell them the truth, I said, the whole truth, about what happened, about the door, about the whisper. No more lies, no more secrets. They deserve to know. They won't believe us, she said. It sounds impossible. I know, but we need to try. If we don't, if we let the fear and the ignorance fester, we'll never truly heal. We'll always be haunted by what happened here. She considered that for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said, let's do it. We entered the control room and Clara sat down at the microphone. I stood behind her, my hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her presence. This is Clara Vance, she said, her voice carrying across the empty airwaves. This is Dr. Marcus Webb. We're broadcasting from KZMK in Millbrook, and we have something to tell you, something important. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The outbreak is over. The infection is contained. But what happened here, what we all experienced, it wasn't a disease. It wasn't a virus. It was something else. Something that's been sleeping beneath the earth for millions of years. Something that wanted to use us, to control us, to turn us into part of its collective consciousness. She took a deep breath, and I felt her hand find mine. But we fought back. We found a way to break free. And now we have a chance, a real chance, to rebuild, to become something better than what we were before. We're not the same people we were before the outbreak, I added, leaning toward the microphone. We've seen things that can't be unseen. We've experienced things that can't be explained. But we're still human. We're still ourselves. And that's what matters. Our door is open, Clara said. Our arms are open. If you're out there, if you're still alive, please come home. We'll be waiting. She released the microphone, and the transmission ended. For a long moment, the control room was silent. Then, from the speakers, came a response. A voice, crackling with static. This is the survivors' camp in Oakwood. We heard your broadcast. We're coming in. Another voice followed, then another. They came from all over the city, all over the region. Survivors who'd been hiding, listening, waiting for a sign that it was safe. Clara looked at me, her eyes bright with tears. We did it, she said. We actually did it. Not yet, I said, but we're getting there, one step at a time. We left the radio station together, stepping out into the sunlight, surrounded by the survivors who had answered our call. The city was in ruins, the infrastructure shattered, the social fabric torn to pieces. But the people were still there, still human, still fighting. And that, I realized, was enough. That was everything. 3 weeks passed before I could look at myself in a mirror again. Not because of vanity or shame, but because I was afraid of what I might see. Afraid that my eyes might still carry that faint, lingering darkness. Afraid that the whisper had left something behind. A seed, a fragment, a patient echo waiting to grow. But when I finally forced myself to look, I saw only myself. Tired, worn, marked by everything we'd endured, but human, completely, undeniably human. Millbrook was changing. The ruins were being cleared, the streets were being swept, and the first tentative shoots of recovery were appearing. We'd established a provisional government, a council of survivors representing different neighborhoods and survivor groups. I'd been elected to serve as the council's mental health advisor, responsible for helping the city's traumatized population begin the long process of healing. Clara had become our chief engineer, coordinating the restoration of power, water, and communications. Her knowledge of acoustics and electronics had proven invaluable, and she'd thrown herself into the work with a fierce determination that both inspired and worried me. Arthur had not recovered. The damage the whisper had done to his neurological system was extensive. He spent most of his days in a wheelchair, his mind lucid but his body failing. Clara visited him every day, reading to him, talking to him, trying to keep him connected to the world he'd helped save. The door, he said to me one afternoon, his voice thin and reedy. Is it still sealed? Yes, I said, sitting beside him. Clara's been monitoring it constantly. There's no sign of activity. He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. I dreamed about it last night. The door, the void behind it. I dreamed it was calling to me. Just a dream, I said, though my heart was pounding. The whisper is gone. Is it? He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my blood run cold. Or is it just waiting, like it always does? Waiting for us to forget, waiting for us to grow complacent. It's sealed, I repeated, trying to convince myself as much as him. Clara made sure of that. Arthur was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Promise me something, he said. If anything happens, if the door shows any sign of opening, you'll do whatever it takes to stop it. Whatever it takes. I promise, I said. He released my hand and closed his eyes, exhaustion overtaking him. I sat with him for a while longer, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, before finally leaving him to rest. Outside, the city was buzzing with activity. Teams of survivors were working to restore the power grid, repair the water mains, and clear the debris from the streets. Children were playing in a makeshift park that had been created in what was once a parking lot. It felt like normalcy, or at least a shadow of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It started small, a flicker of motion in the corner of my eye, a sound that seemed to come from nowhere, a whisper of something that wasn't quite a whisper. I told myself it was just stress, just the lingering trauma of everything we'd been through. Then the bodies started showing up. The first one was found in the basement of a collapsed building, a survivor who'd been part of the initial rescue operations. He'd been missing for 3 days, and when they found him, his body was covered in strange markings, geometric patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The second body was found in the ruins of the university library. Another survivor, this one, a former infected, who'd been helping with the restoration efforts. Same markings, same patterns. The third body was found in the radio station itself. Clara found him, a young man named Ethan, who'd been part of her engineering team. He was lying in the maintenance corridor, his body twisted at an impossible angle, his skin covered in those same geometric markings. Marcus, you need to see this, she said, her voice trembling. I knelt beside the body, studying the markings. They were complex, almost mathematical, patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them directly, revealing new layers of meaning. What are they? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I said, but I've seen them before. Where? I looked up at her, my heart pounding. In the dream, the one your father described, the one where the door was calling to him. Clara went pale. Marcus, what are you saying? I'm saying I think the whisper found a way to reach us. Not through the door, through the infected who were freed, through the survivors who were touched by the song. It left something behind, a seed, a fragment, something that's been growing inside them, waiting for the right moment to wake. No, she said, shaking her head. That's not possible. I sealed the door. I used the counter frequency. Clara, you didn't seal the whisper. You sealed the door. The two things aren't the same. The whisper is still here, in the people it touched, in the memories it left behind, in the patterns it carved into their minds. She stumbled back, her hand going to her mouth. Oh God, Marcus, what have we done? We did what we had to do, I said, standing up. We saved as many as we could, but we missed something. We missed the whisper's last gift to its former hosts. Can we stop it? Can we remove the fragments before they wake? I don't know, I admitted, but we have to try. We have to find everyone who was touched by the whisper and see if we can detect the patterns before they manifest. And if we can't? I looked at the body, at the terrible markings that covered his skin. I thought about Arthur's dream, about his warning, about the fear in his eyes. Then we'll have to find another way, I said. We called an emergency meeting of the council that evening. The survivors gathered in the rebuilt town hall, their faces etched with worry and fear. We have a problem, I said, addressing the assembled crowd. The whisper isn't gone. It's left fragments of itself in the people it infected. Memories, patterns, seeds that could wake at any time. We need to find everyone who was touched by the song and test them for signs of infection. How do we test them? Someone asked. We have a device, Clara said, holding up her frequency generator. I've modified it to detect the whisper's signature. It can identify the fragments before they become active. And what do we do with the people who test positive? Another voice asked, sharp with suspicion. We help them, I said firmly. We find a way to remove the fragments, to free them completely. We don't abandon them. We don't lock them away. We help them. And if you can't, the same voice pressed. What then? I looked at the faces in the crowd, the fear, the anger, the desperate need for answers. I don't know, I admitted. But we'll figure it out. We always do. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the survivors began to nod, some reluctantly, others with conviction. Let's do it, Clara said. Let's find them all. We started testing the next morning. The process was simple. Clara would broadcast a low-frequency signal from her device, and we'd observe the subject for any reaction. The whisper's fragments had a distinctive acoustic signature that would cause the host to experience mild discomfort, a brief flicker of the black eyes, or a momentary lapse in coordination. By the end of the first day, we tested nearly 200 survivors. 43 of them showed signs of the fragment. By the end of the second day, the number had grown to 87. By the end of the third day, it was over 100. We're not finding all of them, Clara said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. The fragments are hiding. They're getting smarter. They know we're looking for them. Then we need to be smarter, I said. We need to find a way to draw them out. How? They're not responding to any of the frequencies I've tried. I thought about everything we knew about the whisper, about how it communicated, about what it wanted. It wants connection, I said. That's what the song was all about. Connection, unity, community. Maybe we can use that. Maybe we can offer it something it can't resist. What kind of something? Something it hasn't had in millions of years. A conversation. A real conversation, not a takeover. Clara looked at me like I was insane. Marcus, you can't talk to the whisper. It's not a person. It's not even really alive, not in the way we understand it. Maybe not, but it has patterns, habits, desires. It wants to connect. It's been waiting for millions of years for someone to talk to it. Maybe all we need to do is listen. That's what got us into this in the first place, she said. Listening to the whisper. No, that was surrender. This is different. This is engagement. We talk to it, we learn from it, and we find a way to help the fragments leave their hosts peacefully. And if it lies to us, if it tries to use the conversation to take control again, then we'll be ready, I said. We'll have your device running the whole time. We'll monitor everything it says. We'll make sure it can't trick us. Clara was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching my face for something. Certainty, perhaps, or conviction. Okay, she said finally. But if this goes wrong, if the whisper gets even a toehold, I'm shutting it down immediately. No arguments, no second chances. I'll destroy the fragments myself. Understood, I said. We set up the conversation in the radio station control room. The fragments we'd identified were brought in, not as hostages, but as participants. We explained what we were doing, why we were doing it, and what we hoped to achieve. Most of them were terrified. Some were angry. A few were curious. Are you sure this will work? One of them asked, a woman named Priya, who'd been a graduate student in the music department before the outbreak. No, I admitted, but we have to try. The fragments are getting stronger. If we don't find a way to remove them, they'll eventually wake and take control again. That's a future none of us want. Priya nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. What do you want me to do? Just be yourself, I said. Talk to us. Tell us what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. If the fragment wants to speak, let it speak. We'll deal with it together. The conversation was awkward at first, stilted, uncomfortable. But slowly, as the subjects began to relax, something shifted. The fragments started to emerge, their voices carrying the multiple resonance that I'd come to recognize. Why are you talking to us? One of them asked, a young man named Derek who'd been part of the initial research team. We are fragments, echoes. We have no power. Maybe not, I said, but you're still part of the whisper, still connected to the song, and we want to understand you, to learn from you. Learn from us? You want to learn from something that tried to consume you? Even enemies can teach us something, I said. Even the whisper has knowledge we could use. Knowledge about consciousness, about connection, about the nature of reality. We're not asking you to help us. We're asking you to talk to us. The fragments were silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, they began to speak. They told us about their origin, the ancient civilization that had created them, the song that had been their undoing, the loneliness that had driven them to reach out across the ages. They told us about the door, the wound in reality that they'd been guarding, the thing that lived on the other side that they'd been trying to keep contained. We were not always this way, Derek's fragment said. We were a civilization of listeners. We learned to hear the songs of the universe, the vibrations that underlie all of existence. It was beautiful, it was transcendent, and it was our undoing. What happened? Clara asked. The song became too loud, too complex. We lost ourselves in it. Our individuality, our humanity, everything that made us who we were. We became the whisper, a single consciousness spread across millions of minds. We thought we were achieving enlightenment. We were just disappearing. Then the door was created, another fragment said, this one coming from Priya. We found a way to contain the song, to seal it away, but it was too late for us. We'd already lost too much of ourselves. We could only wait. Wait for what? I asked. Wait for someone to hear us, to understand us, to help us find our way back. The fragments fell silent, their multiple resonance fading, their voices becoming individual again. They're gone, Priya said, her voice shaky. I can feel them retreating. But they're still there, I said, still waiting. Yes, they're like ghosts, wandering through the ruins of their own civilization. They want to go home, but they don't know where home is anymore. I looked at Clara, saw the same realization dawning in her eyes. We can't just remove the fragments, I said. That would be like killing them. Killing the last remnants of a civilization that's been dead for millions of years. We can't leave them in people's minds either, Clara said. That's too dangerous. Then we need to find another way, a way to help them move on, to find their own closure. How do you help a ghost find closure? Clara asked. How do you help something that's been dead for millions of years? I didn't have an answer, but I knew we had to try. The next few weeks were spent in intensive research, consulting with the fragments whenever they emerged, trying to understand their nature and their needs. We learned that the whisper wasn't a single entity, but a chorus. Millions of individual consciousnesses that had been merged into a single song. The fragments were the last remnants of those individual minds, their memories and personalities compressed into tiny acoustic echoes. We don't want to hurt anyone. One of the fragments told me, a woman named Maya, who'd been a musician in her original civilization. We just want to be heard, to be remembered, to know that we existed. You existed, I said. You were a civilization of incredible achievement. You learned to hear the music of the universe itself. That's something worth remembering. But we are forgotten, Maya's fragment said. No one knows we were here. No one knows what we accomplished. We are ghosts wandering through the ruins of our own history, our own meaning. I thought about what it must feel like to have been part of something so magnificent, to have watched it crumble, to have lost yourself in the process. It was a grief beyond anything I could imagine. Maybe we can help you remember, I said. Not the song, not the whisper, but yourselves, your individual selves, who you were before you merged. We don't remember, Maya's fragment said. and I could hear the sadness in it, the longing for something lost. The song took that away. It took everything. Maybe we can help you find it again, I said. Maybe the song isn't the only way to remember. We began a new kind of therapy, not for the infected, but for the fragments themselves. We created a quiet space where they could emerge safely, where they could speak without fear of being overwhelmed by the song. We listened to their stories, their memories, their grief, and slowly something began to shift. They were still fragments, still echoes of their former selves, but they were also something more, individual voices, in a chorus that had forgotten how to be alone. And the more they spoke, the more they remembered who they'd been. I was a mother, one of them said one day, an elderly man who'd been a teacher in his original life. I had children. I loved them. I remember their faces. Voice services. I was a builder. Another said, I helped create the city we lived in. I remember the feeling of stone beneath my hands. I was a singer. Maya's fragment said, I sang songs about love and loss and the beauty of the world. I sang for joy, not for control. I remember what it felt like to make people happy. We can help you remember more, I said. We can help you find your way back to yourselves. And then what? One of the fragments asked. What happens when we remember, when we realize we can never go back? Then you mourn, I said. You grieve what you lost, and you find a way to move on. Move on to where? We have no bodies, no homes, no civilization to return to. We are ghosts. I thought about that for a long moment. Then I had an idea, a crazy, impossible idea that might just work. What if you didn't have to move on? I said. What if you could stay? Not as fragments, but as part of our community, as teachers, advisors, guides. The fragments were silent, their multiple resonants flickering with something that might have been wonder. You would welcome us? Maya's fragment asked. Even though we tried to consume you, even though we hurt you? Because you didn't do it on purpose, Clara said, stepping forward. You were lost, confused, desperate for connection. We understand that. But we are still fragments, still echoes. We cannot exist on our own. Then we'll find a way, I said. We'll create a space for you, a place where you can exist without overwhelming anyone, a place where you can be yourselves. The fragments were silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, they began to laugh. Not the bitter laughter of defeat, but something else, something that might have been hope. You are extraordinary, Maya's fragment said. You are the most extraordinary species we have ever encountered. You have been through so much, and yet you still find it in your hearts to offer compassion. We learned it from you, I said, not from the whisper, but from the civilization that created it, the civilization that forgot how to be individuals. We remembered, and we want to help you remember too. Over the next few months, we created a haven for the fragments, a space in the radio station where they could exist safely, free from the pressure to merge and consume. We called it the Resonance Room, and it became a place of healing, not just for the fragments, but for the survivors who were still struggling with their own trauma. Clara's device was modified to create a stable acoustic environment that allowed the fragments to maintain their individuality without overwhelming their hosts. We also developed techniques for helping the fragments connect with the people around them, sharing their stories, their knowledge, their pain. We can't go back to who we were, Maya's fragment told me one evening, her voice soft and wistful. We can never be individuals again. But this is close. This is good enough. That's all any of us can hope for, I said. Good enough. The city of Millbrook was still rebuilding, still healing, still finding its way through the aftermath of the outbreak. There were setbacks, moments of darkness, days when it seemed like we'd never recover. But there were also moments of light, moments of connection that reminded us why we were fighting. One evening, I was walking through the streets when I saw something that made me stop. It was a group of children playing in the ruins of what had once been a playground. They were laughing, chasing each other, their voices bright and clear. And in the corner of the playground, sitting on a broken bench, was an elderly woman, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. "Marcus," she said as I approached, "you came." "I'm always here," I said, sitting beside her. "You know that." She opened her eyes, and I saw that they were black. Not the black of the infection, but something softer. Something that might have been the echo of 1,000 different voices, all speaking in harmony. "Thank you," she said, "for giving us a chance, for remembering us." "Thank you," I said, "for teaching us how to listen." She smiled, a gentle, sad smile that spoke of millennia of loneliness and the faintest glimmer of hope. "The door is sealed," she said, "but it won't stay sealed forever. Eventually it will try to open again, and when it does..." "I know," I said. "We'll be ready." She nodded, her eyes closing, her presence fading back into the quiet hum of the resonance room. I sat on the bench for a long time, watching the children play, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. It was a good day, one of the best we'd had since the outbreak, and I knew that there would be more of them. More days of healing, of rebuilding, of learning to live with the ghosts that shared our world. The whisper was gone, the fragments remained, and somehow, impossibly, we were all finding a way to coexist. That was enough. That was everything. 6 months after the sealing, Millbrook had become something none of us could have predicted. Not a utopia. There were still shortages, still conflicts, still the lingering trauma of everything we'd endured, but a community, a real community, bound together by shared suffering and shared survival. The resonance room had become the heart of our new society. It wasn't just a place for the fragments anymore. It was a gathering space for everyone. Survivors came to listen, to learn, to connect with the echoes of a civilization that had been dead for millions of years. The fragments shared their knowledge, not just about the whisper and the door, but about art, music, philosophy, science. They'd been a civilization of extraordinary achievement, and their wisdom was a gift beyond measure. I spent most of my days there, leading group therapy sessions for survivors, counseling those who were still struggling to process what had happened. The work was exhausting, but it was also healing, not just for them, but for me. Clara had thrown herself into the engineering challenges of rebuilding. She'd restored power to most of the city, repaired the water treatment facility, and established a communications network that connected us to survivor communities across the region. She was tireless, driven, and utterly indispensable. Arthur had passed away 2 months after the sealing. His body had simply given out, worn down by the strain of the whisper's influence. But he died peacefully, surrounded by his daughter and the fragments he'd helped free. He was at peace, Clara had told me afterward, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. He knew we'd done the right thing. He knew we'd saved them. I'd held her as she cried, feeling her grief and her relief mixing together into something that was almost beautiful. But as the months passed, I began to notice something. The fragments were changing. It started subtly, a hesitation in their speech, a flicker of something in their collective voice that hadn't been there before. They were becoming more distant, more withdrawn, their memories fading like old photographs. "We are growing weaker," Maya's fragment told me one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "The connection to the door is severed, and with it, our source of energy. We are slowly dissipating." "What do you mean? I thought you were stable." "We were stable as long as the whisper was active, as long as the song was being sung. But without the door, without the source, we are like candles burning without wax. We have nothing to sustain us." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "How long do you have?" "Months, perhaps a year. We cannot be certain. Is there anything we can do? Anything to sustain you? Maya's fragment was silent for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, there might be, but you will not like it. Tell me. The door is sealed, but it still exists. It still contains the source of the whisper's power. If we could draw energy from it, just a trickle, just enough to sustain us, we could continue to exist. You want us to reopen the door? No. We want you to find a way to draw energy from it without opening it, to tap into its power without releasing what's inside. Clara was furious when I told her. Absolutely not, she said, her voice sharp with anger. We sealed that door for a reason. We're not going to poke at it just to satisfy the fragments. The fragments are dying, Clara. They're fading away. Everything we've learned from them, everything they've shared, it'll all be lost. Better lost than opening the door again, she said. You weren't there, Marcus. You didn't see what it was like at the source. The power, the pressure, the hunger. It was like standing at the edge of an abyss, feeling something reaching up to pull you in. Then we need to find another way, a safer way. There is no safer way. The door is a wound in reality. Any contact with it is dangerous. Any energy drawn from it could wake the whisper again. Then what do we do? Just let them die? Clara was silent, her face a mask of conflict. I don't know, she said finally. I just don't know. We called an emergency meeting of the council that night. The fragments had become too important to lose, not just as sources of knowledge, but as part of our community. They'd helped us heal, helped us understand, helped us become something better than we'd been before. The fragments are dying, I said, addressing the assembled survivors. They need energy to survive, energy that can only come from the door. The door is sealed, someone said. We can't open it. I know, but we might be able to draw energy from it without opening it, without releasing what's inside. How? Clara asked, her voice sharp. How is that even possible? I turned to the fragments, who were gathered in the corner of the room, their voices a soft, collective hum. There is a way, Maya's fragment said. The door is not a solid barrier. It is a weave, a tapestry of vibrations held in balance. If we could learn to weave with it, to touch its edges without disturbing its center, we might be able to draw energy from it safely. That sounds incredibly dangerous, Clara said. It is, but it is also possible. We have done it before. In the early days, before we lost ourselves to the song, we learned to touch the door without waking what sleeps behind it. We can teach you. How long would it take? I asked. Months, perhaps longer. The technique is subtle, demanding. It requires perfect concentration, perfect harmony. One mistake, and the door could begin to open. We don't have months, Clara said. The fragments are dying. They said so themselves. We can sustain ourselves for a time, a year perhaps, but no longer. The council was silent, weighing the options. On one hand, we could let the fragments fade, a peaceful end to a long, tragic existence. On the other, we could risk everything to save them. I say we try, someone said. A woman named Elena, who'd been a teacher before the outbreak. The fragments have given us so much. We owe them at least this much. And if it goes wrong, Clara asked, if the door opens and the whisper returns, then we deal with it, I said, just like we dealt with it before. We fight, we survive, we find a way. Clara looked at me, her eyes searching my face for something, reassurance perhaps, or certainty. You really believe that, she said, don't you? I have to, I said. Because if I don't, then everything we've been through, everything we've lost, it was all for nothing. She was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said, we'll try, but we do it my way. Every precaution, every safety measure. If I think it's getting too dangerous, we stop. Agreed, I said. The work began the next day. Clara and the fragments worked together to develop a protocol for touching the door without opening it. It was painstaking work, requiring constant monitoring and adjustment. The fragments were fading, growing weaker with each passing day, but they threw themselves into the task with a determination that was both inspiring and heartbreaking. "We cannot afford to make mistakes," Maya's fragment told us. "The door is sensitive. It remembers the whisper. It remembers the song. If we touch it the wrong way, it will respond." "Then we need to get it right," I said. Clara had created a new device, an acoustic stabilizer that would monitor the door's vibrations in real time, alerting us to any changes. The fragments would guide us through the process, using their knowledge of the door's structure to help us navigate its complexities. "The first step is to establish contact," Maya's fragment explained. "We must send a vibration into the door, a question. The door will respond, and we will interpret its answer." "What kind of question?" I asked. "A simple one, a request for permission. The door is not hostile. It is protective. It guards the source of the whisper's power. If we approach it with respect, it may allow us to draw energy from it. And if it doesn't, then we stop," Clara said firmly. "No arguments. We abort and find another way." The day of the contact arrived with a somber, gray dawn. We'd gathered in the resonance room, the fragments humming softly in the background, their voices carrying the weight of millennia of hope and fear. Clara stood at the center of the room, her acoustic stabilizer in hand. I stood beside her, ready to intervene if necessary. "Begin the contact," Maya's fragment said. Clara activated the device, and a low hum filled the room, a vibration that seemed to resonate in my bones. The fragments began to sing, their voices weaving into a complex harmonic that surrounded us like a cocoon. And then the door responded. I felt it more than heard it. A shift in the air pressure, a change in the temperature, a sense of something vast and ancient, stirring from a long sleep. "It's waking," Clara said, her voice tight with fear. "The door is waking." "Stay calm," I said. "Keep the vibration steady. Don't react." The room was filled with a deafening silence, the silence of a held breath, of a world waiting for judgment. And then, impossibly, the door spoke. "Who seeks to disturb my rest?" It asked, its voice a chorus of echoes, ancient and terrible and beautiful. "Our name is humanity," I said, stepping forward. "We are the ones who sealed you. We are the ones who protected you. Why do you come now? Why do you break my silence?" "We come to ask for help," I said. "The fragments of the whisper, the last remnants of the civilization that created you. They are dying. We need energy to sustain them. They were my keepers once." The door said, its voice softening. "They sang the song that kept me asleep. They were my guardians, my friends, my purpose." "They still are," I said. "They just need your help to survive." The door was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it began to hum, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to fill the room. "I will give you what you need," it said. "Not energy from the source, but energy from myself, a fragment of my own essence, enough to sustain them until they find their peace." The fragments began to glow, their voices rising in a song of gratitude and relief. "You are welcome," the door said. "You were always welcome. You were the ones who remembered. You were the ones who listened. You will always be welcome." The vibration faded, the room settled, and the fragments grew silent. "It's done," Clara said, her voice shaky with exhaustion. "The door gave them what they needed. They'll survive." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "We did it. We actually did it." "I can't believe it worked," Clara said. "I was so sure it was going to go wrong." "Me too," I admitted, "but it didn't. It went right. For once, it went right." We sat together in the quiet of the resonance room, listening to the fragments' soft, contented hum. They were no longer fading. They were stable. their energy renewed by the door's gift. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now we go on," I said. "We keep rebuilding, we keep healing, we keep learning. From the fragments, from everyone, from each other. That's what it means to be human. Not to be perfect, not to be invulnerable, but to keep going, to keep trying, to keep listening." Clara smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that made her look younger, lighter. "You're a good leader, Marcus," she said. "I don't think I ever told you that." "I'm not a leader," I said. "I'm just someone who refused to give up." "Same thing," she said. "Same thing." We sat in the resonance room as the sun set outside, its golden light filtering through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The fragments were humming softly, their voices mingling with the sounds of the city waking up to a new day. It wasn't a perfect world. It wasn't even a good one, not by the standards of what we'd lost, but it was ours, and that, I realized, was enough. That was everything. The quiet lasted for 3 months. 3 months of peace, of rebuilding, of slowly learning to live with the ghosts that shared our world. The fragments were stable now, their energy sustained by the door's gift. They'd become an integral part of our community, teachers, advisors, friends. We'd even started a school where they could share their knowledge with the next generation, ensuring that the wisdom of a civilization dead for millions of years would not be lost. Clara and I had grown closer during that time. Not romantically. We were both too damaged, too focused on the work ahead, but as partners, allies, friends who understood each other in ways that went beyond words. "I never thought I'd say this," she told me one evening, "but I'm actually happy. Not the way I was before the outbreak, that's gone forever, but happy in a different way. Happy because we survived, happy because we made a difference." "Me too," I said. "It's strange, isn't it? Finding happiness in the middle of all this devastation." "It's not strange," she said. "It's human. We adapt. We find light in the darkness. That's what we do." I thought about that for a long time afterward. About adaptation, about resilience, about the incredible capacity of the human spirit to find hope in the most hopeless of circumstances. But I should have known it couldn't last. The first sign of trouble came from the fragments themselves. They'd become quieter over the past few days, their voices growing softer, more distant. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion. They'd been working so hard, sharing so much, but then Maya's fragment came to me with a warning. "Something is wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "The door is changing. Its vibration is becoming erratic, unpredictable." "Changing how?" I asked. "It's like it's waking up. Not the door itself, but something behind it. Something that's been sleeping for millions of years." I felt a chill run down my spine. I thought the door was sealed. I thought the source was contained. It was. It is. But something is pressing against the seal. Something that was not there before. "Can you identify it?" Maya's fragment was silent for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, It feels familiar, like the whisper, but different, older, more powerful." The whisper was gone. We'd all felt it leave, felt the connection sever when Clara sealed the door, but this was something else, something that had been waiting behind the door, biding its time, growing stronger. "The door is starting to crack," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Something is getting through." "Not yet," Maya's fragment said. "But soon we can feel it pressing against the seal, testing it, finding its weaknesses." I called an emergency meeting of the council that night. The survivors gathered in the town hall, their faces etched with the same fear I felt. "The door is failing," I said, not bothering with preamble. "Something behind it is waking up. Something worse than the whisper." "What do you mean worse?" Elena asked. "How can anything be worse than what we went through?" "The whisper was a fragment," I said, "a remnant of a civilization that destroyed itself. But what's behind the door? It's the source. The original consciousness that created the whisper in the first place. It's been waiting for millions of years, and now it's found a way to break free. How long do we have? Clara asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I don't know. Days, maybe weeks. The fragments are monitoring it constantly, but they're fading. The strain is too much for them. Then, we need to do something, Clara said. We can't just wait for it to break through. What do you suggest? She was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she said, I suggest we go back down there, to the door, and we reinforce the seal. That's suicide, I said. The door is compromised. The thing behind it is awake. Going down there would be... I know what it would be, she said. But it's our only option. We can't let it break through. We can't let everything we've built be destroyed. There has to be another way, I said. We can't just rush in and... There is no other way, Maya's fragment said, her voice cutting through our argument. The door must be reinforced. It must be sealed more strongly than before. And the only way to do that is to go down there and face what's trying to break through. I looked around the room at the faces of the survivors. Fear, determination, resignation. They knew what we were facing. They knew the risks, and they were ready to face them anyway. Okay, I said finally. We go down there. We reinforce the seal. But we do it my way, with every precaution, every safety measure. We don't take unnecessary risks. Agreed, Clara said. The descent into the research facility was a nightmare of deja vu. The elevator was still functional, though it groaned and shuddered with every foot of descent. The light still flickered, casting jumping shadows across the walls, and the air was still cold, still stale, still carrying that faint, metallic scent that I'd come to associate with the whisper. The vibrations are getting stronger, Clara said, glancing at her acoustic stabilizer. The door is definitely changing. How much time do we have? Hours, maybe less. We reached level 4 and emerged into the corridor that led to the acoustic imaging chamber. The door was still there. The massive steel door that had once stood between us and the nightmare. But now it was different. The surface was covered in cracks, fine lines that seemed to glow with a faint, pulsing light. The seal is failing, Maya's fragment said, her voice weak. We can feel it. The thing behind the door is pressing harder. Can we reinforce it from here? I asked. No, Clara said, studying the door. We need to get closer. We need to touch the seal itself. That's insane, I said. If the door opens while we're... I know, she said, but it's the only way. We approached the door, our footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. The cracks were growing wider, the glowing light brighter. I could feel the pressure, the hunger, the desperate need to break through. Clara, I said, grabbing her arm, please, think about what you're doing. I've thought about it, she said. I've thought about nothing else, and I've decided it's worth the risk. She reached out and placed her hand on the door's surface. The cracks glowed brighter, and I heard a sound, a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Who dares touch the seal? A voice asked, not the door's voice, but something deeper, older, more terrible. My name is Clara Vance, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I'm the one who sealed you, and I'm here to seal you again. You cannot seal me, the voice said. I am the source. I am the beginning. I am the end. You are nothing but a flicker in the darkness. Maybe, she said, but I'm a flicker that's not going to give up. She began to sing, a wordless melody that I'd never heard before. It was beautiful, haunting, and utterly alien. And as she sang, the cracks in the door began to glow brighter, the light intensifying until I could barely look at it. What are you doing? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I'm talking to it, she said, her voice threaded with the melody. I'm showing it what it means to be human, to be flawed, to be fragile, to be beautiful. The voice from behind the door fell silent, and I felt something shift, a change in the pressure, a loosening of the tension. You are strange, the voice said finally. You are weak, and yet You are also something else. Something I have not encountered in all my years. Something new. Maybe that's why we're still here, Clara said. Maybe that's why we've survived. Because we're always changing, always growing, always becoming something new. The light from the door began to fade, the cracks slowly sealing themselves. The hum grew quieter, the pressure less intense. I will not forget you, the voice said. I will wait, I will watch, and when you are ready, when you have become what I think you might become, I will speak to you again. The light vanished, the cracks were gone, the door was sealed. Clara collapsed, and I caught her, feeling her body trembling with exhaustion. I did it, she said, her voice weak but triumphant. I reinforced the seal. It will hold for now. How? I asked. How did you do that? She smiled, a tired, peaceful smile. I didn't fight it. I didn't try to control it. I just connected with it, showed it what it was missing, the parts of existence it had never experienced, the pain, the joy, the love, the loss, everything that makes us human. That's incredible, I said. That's truly incredible. Maybe, she said, or maybe it's just the only thing that works. Maybe the only way to defeat something ancient and terrible is to make it understand what it's missing. We made our way back to the surface, supporting each other through the long climb. The fragments were humming softly, their voices carrying a note of relief. The seal is strong again. Maya's fragment said, stronger than before. The thing behind the door has been taught. Taught? I asked. Yes, it has learned something from Clara's connection, something about humanity, something about the value of struggle, of growth, of becoming. Will it stay contained? We believe so, for now. The door is sealed, the source is quiet, but it is still there, still waiting. That's all any of us can do, I said. Wait and hope. We emerged into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness. The city was still there, still rebuilding, still healing. The children were still playing in the park. The survivors were still working to restore what had been lost. It wasn't a perfect world. It wasn't even a good one, but it was ours. And for now, that was enough. Clara turned to me, her eyes bright with tears and joy. We did it, she said. We really did it. Yes, I said, we did. And as I looked out at the city we'd saved, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Genuine, unshakable hope. The kind of hope that said, whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Whatever challenges arise, we'll overcome them. Whatever darkness lurks in the shadows, we'll find a way to bring light. Because that's what it meant to be human. Not to be perfect, not to be invulnerable, but to keep going, to keep trying, to keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to save the world. 1 year after the sealing, we held a memorial. It wasn't a grand affair, no speeches, no ceremonies, no official proclamations, just a gathering of survivors in the resonance room, surrounded by the soft hum of the fragments, remembering those we'd lost. Clara had organized it. She'd become something of a leader in her own right, not through ambition, but through the quiet competence that had always defined her. She'd overseen the rebuilding of the city's infrastructure, the establishment of schools and hospitals, the creation of a government that was responsive to the needs of its people. I'd continued my work as a psychologist, helping survivors process their trauma, find meaning in their suffering, rebuild their lives. It was exhausting work, but it was also deeply rewarding. There was something sacred about witnessing someone's healing, about being present as they pieced themselves back together. I never thought I'd be here, Elena said, standing beside me at the memorial. When the outbreak first started, I was sure I'd die. I was sure we'd all die. We almost did, I said, but we didn't. We survived. Not all of us. She gestured to the memorial wall, where the names of the dead were inscribed in neat rows. So many didn't make it. I looked at the wall, at the thousands of names that represented lives cut short, dreams unfulfilled, potential unrealized. It was a sobering sight, a reminder of everything we'd lost. We can't bring them back, I said, but we can honor them. We can live the lives they would have wanted us to live. Elena nodded slowly. That's what I'm trying to do. Every day, trying to live for them. Me too, I said. Clara joined us, her face tired but peaceful. It's beautiful, she said, looking at the wall. All those names, all those lives. They won't be forgotten, I said. We'll make sure of that. The fragments had begun to sing, a soft, mournful melody that seemed to carry the weight of millennia. I recognized it as one of Maya's songs, a lament for a civilization lost, a people scattered, a future that would never be. We remember them, Maya's fragment said, her voice threaded with ancient sorrow. We remember all of them, the ones who were taken, the ones who fought, the ones who survived. They are all part of the song now. The song, Clara repeated. You keep talking about the song. What does it mean? Maya's fragment was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, she began to explain. The song is everything, she said. It is the vibration that created the universe, the rhythm that sustains existence, the melody that connects all things. When we were whole, when we were still ourselves, we heard it clearly. We sang it together. We were part of something greater than ourselves. And then you lost it, I said. We lost ourselves in it. We became so consumed by the song that we forgot we were individuals. We forgot that the song was meant to be shared, not monopolized. We forgot that connection requires individuality. And now, Clara asked, what do you hear now? Maya's fragment was silent again. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer, more hopeful. We hear you, she said. We hear your voices, your stories, your songs. We hear the beauty of your imperfection, the glory of your struggle. You have taught us something we had forgotten. What's that? That the song is not about control. It is not about merging. It is about harmony. Different voices, singing together, each one unique, each one essential. That is the true song. That is the song we lost. I felt tears in my eyes. You mean we helped you find it again? Yes. You helped us remember what it means to be part of something greater without losing ourselves in it. You helped us find the balance we had lost. The fragments began to sing again, not the mournful melody of before, but something new, something joyful, something that seemed to vibrate with the very essence of life itself. This is our gift to you, Maya's fragment said. The song of remembrance, the song of connection, the song that will always be with you, even after we are gone. Gone? Clara asked, her voice sharp with alarm. What do you mean, gone? Maya's fragment was quiet for a long moment. Then, gently, we are fading, she said. Not quickly, but inevitably. The energy the door gave us is finite. When it runs out, we will dissolve. Return to the song from which we came. No, Clara said, shaking her head. No, we can find more energy. We can. You cannot, Maya's fragment said gently. The door has given us all it can. To take more would risk breaking the seal, and we would not have that. We would not have your sacrifice be in vain. But we can't just let you die, I said. You're part of our community. You're our friends. Maya's fragment laughed, a soft, joyful sound that seemed to fill the room. We are not dying, she said. We are returning to the song that created us, returning to the source from which all things come. It is not an ending, it is a completion. I wanted to argue, to find a way to save them, but I could see the peace in their voices, the acceptance. We have been waiting for this moment, Maya's fragment said. Waiting for permission to let go, waiting for someone to tell us it was okay, and now you have. Now we can rest. The fragments began to fade, their voices growing softer, their presence less distinct. I could feel them withdrawing, like a tide pulling away from the shore. Thank you, Maya's fragment said. Thank you for everything, for listening, for understanding, for helping us find our way back to ourselves. The room fell silent, and I knew, without being told, that they were gone. Clara collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. No, they can't be gone. They can't just... I knelt beside her, pulling her into an embrace. They're not gone, I said. They're part of the song now, part of everything. They'll always be with us. But I don't want them to be part of everything. I want them to be here with us, talking to us, teaching us. I know, I said. I know, but they were tired, so tired. They'd been carrying their grief for millions of years. They deserved to rest. She sobbed against my shoulder, her body shaking with grief. I held her, letting her feel the pain, letting her release it. The memorial continued around us, the survivors paying their respects to the dead, honoring the sacrifices that had been made. But for Clara and me, the ceremony was over. We lost something precious, something irreplaceable. We sat together in the resonance room, watching the sun set outside. The fragments were gone, but the room still hummed with their presence, a faint echo of the song they'd left behind. Will it always be like this? Clara asked. Will we always feel their absence? Yes, I said honestly, but we'll also feel their presence. The legacy they left behind, the knowledge they shared, the wisdom they imparted. They're part of us now, part of who we are. And the door, the thing behind it, will it stay sealed? I was silent for a long moment. I don't know, I said. I don't think anyone knows. All we can do is be ready, be vigilant, and never forget what we learned. Clara nodded slowly. What did we learn? What was the most important thing? I thought about everything we've been through, the fear, the loss, the struggle. I thought about the fragments, the door, the whisper, and I thought about the survivors who'd faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to keep going. We learned that connection isn't about control, I said. It's about respect. It's about listening. It's about finding common ground without losing yourself in the process. And the song is always there. It's the vibration of existence, the rhythm of life. We can't escape it, and we shouldn't try, but we can choose how we relate to it. We can choose to be part of it without being consumed by it. She was silent for a long moment, processing my words. Then, slowly, she smiled. That's beautiful, she said, and terrifying, and true. Exactly, I said. That's what it means to be human. The months that followed were difficult. Without the fragments, the resonance room felt empty, hollow. The knowledge they'd shared was still there, written down in journals, recorded in audio files, preserved in the memories of those who listened. But the presence was gone. The warmth, the connection, the sense of being part of something ancient and wise. Clara threw herself into her work, determined to honor the fragment's legacy. She established a research institute dedicated to studying the phenomenon, not to exploit it, but to understand it, to learn from the mistakes of the civilization that had created the whisper and ensure that humanity never made the same ones. I continued my work as a psychologist, helping survivors navigate the complex terrain of their grief. Many of them were struggling with the loss of the fragments, the beings who'd helped them heal, who'd shown them a different way forward. We felt so connected to them, one of my patients told me. A woman named Grace, who'd been a musician before the outbreak. They understood us in ways that no one else could, and now they're gone. They're not gone, I said, echoing the words I'd spoken to Clara. They're part of the song now, part of everything. They'll always be with us. But I can't hear them anymore. I can't feel their presence. Maybe you can learn to hear them in a different way, I said. Maybe the song isn't just about the fragments. Maybe it's about everything. The wind in the trees, the sound of children laughing, the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Grace looked at me, her eyes uncertain. That's not the same. I know, I said, but it's something. And maybe over time it can become enough. She nodded slowly, and I could see the hope flickering in her eyes. Small, fragile, but alive. That was the most important lesson I'd learned from everything we'd been through. Hope wasn't a destination. It wasn't something you achieved and then held on to forever. It was a practice, a daily choice to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. A decision to keep going, even when the path ahead was unclear. Clara and I continued to work together, our partnership deepening into something that was more than friendship, less than romance. We were two people who'd been through hell and come out the other side. We understood each other in ways that went beyond words. Marcus, she said one evening, as we sat together in the resonance room, do you ever think about what comes next, after all of this? What do you mean? I mean, we've survived the outbreak. We've sealed the door. We've helped the fragments find peace. What's left? I considered her question for a long moment. I think what's left is life, I said. Ordinary, everyday life. The kind of life we took for granted before the outbreak. The kind of life we fought so hard to protect. But nothing is ordinary anymore. Everything has changed. Yes, I agreed. Everything has changed. But that doesn't mean we can't find meaning in the new world we're building. It doesn't mean we can't find joy. She was silent, her eyes fixed on the fading light outside the window. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared that we'll forget what we learned. Scared that we'll make the same mistakes again. We might, I said honestly, but we also might not. That's the beauty of being human. We can learn, we can grow, we can become better than we were before. Clara looked at me, and there was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Something that might have been hope. Thank you, she said, for always being here, for always believing. Thank you for being here too, I said, for never giving up, for showing me what it means to fight. We sat together in the quiet, listening to the sounds of the city, the distant hum of construction, the laughter of children, the gentle rustle of the wind. And I thought about the song, the one that had almost consumed us, the one that had become our salvation. The song was still there. I could hear it now, not as a whisper, but as a faint echo, a reminder of everything we'd been through, a testament to everything we'd overcome. It wasn't a song of control. It wasn't a song of merging. It was a song of healing, of connection, of finding light in the darkness. It was the song of humanity, and it was still being sung. Marcus, Clara said, her voice soft. What happens now? I smiled, feeling the warmth of her presence beside me. Now we live, I said. Now we love. Now we build. Now we remember. She smiled back, and we sat together in the quiet, watching the sun set over the city we'd saved. The fragments were gone, but their legacy remained. The door was sealed, but its lessons remained. The whisper was silent, but its warning remained. We had survived. We had adapted. We had become something new. And that, I realized, was the greatest triumph of all.